Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Philip added, catching on to the plan. Philip, being the city lord of Roa, was highly skilled in negotiation, and with his wife's prompt, he quickly tried to bargain with the bandits. This is the war-torn zone of the Holy Kingdom of Milis. What good is being the lord of some distant Azura territory? You could claim to be a prince for all we care. One of the bandits sneered. The outlaws were tempted by Philip's offer but hesitant. After all, this was the southern part of the central continent, far from the Azura kingdom. Plus, they had no reason to believe that Philip was actually a noble. Philip found himself at a loss. Both he and Hilda had been wearing simple clothes when the disaster hit, leaving them without any documents or items that could prove their noble status. If only we had something to prove we were nobles, perhaps these bandits would be more cautious. Philip thought in frustration. In most kingdoms, killing nobles was a grave offense that was strictly punished. Seeing the bandits closing in and ready to kill them, Hilda suddenly remembered the light of dawn in her hands. While we don't have anything to prove we're nobles, this flower should at least show that we aren't short on wealth, she said hastily. The flower in her hand glowed with a soft light, immediately catching the attention of the bandits. Among the outlaws, there were a few with enough knowledge to recognize the rare flower. Boss, that's the light of dawn. I once saw it in a noble's garden when I worked as a guard. This flower only grows deep in the forests where magical beasts roam, making it extremely difficult to harvest. It sells for an exorbitant price. Most nobles can't even afford to keep it. That little flower's worth that much? The leader said in disbelief, eyeing the glowing plant. In the end, Philip and Hilda's lives were spared. The bandits realized that if they were rich enough to keep something like the light of dawn, even if they weren't nobles, they were clearly wealthy. Killing them outright would be a waste. There was far more profit in holding them for ransom. Chapter 282, Rescuing Eris' parents. In order to allow Philip and Hilda to contact someone from the Boreas family, the bandits decided to spare their lives for now and planned to take them to the nearest town. Since Philip claimed to be a noble of the Azura kingdom, the bandits figured there might still be people in the Holy Kingdom of Milis who could recognize him. On top of that, once they learned how valuable the Light of Dawn was, they became eager to sell it, as it was essentially worthless to them. Usually, only corrupt nobles would be willing to pay such high prices for an ornamental item like that. After hearing that some wealthy nobles in the capital of Milis, who were devout followers of the Milis Church, had a penchant for flowers symbolizing light and hope, the bandits decided to disguise themselves as merchants and head to the capital. Their plan had 2 purposes, to sell the Light of Dawn and to verify Philip's identity. If Philip had lied to them, they had no qualms about killing him. As for Hilda, because of her beauty and curvaceous figure, they figured she would fetch a good price in the capital as well. In short, whether or not Philip was truly a noble, the bandits felt they had nothing to lose. With this sure-win mentality, the bandit group took Philip and Hilda with them and began their journey toward the capital. For the bandits, this was nothing new. They were well practiced in smuggling and disguising themselves as merchants to enter cities. Unfortunately for them, fate wasn't on their side. While traveling to the capital, they crossed paths with Wood and his group. At first, it didn't seem like a big deal. Wood appeared to be someone not to be trifled with, so the bandits kept their distance. However, both Wood and Zenith caught a glimpse of Hilda among the group. It couldn't be helped. Despite their disguise, the bandit group consisted entirely of men, making Hilda stand out. Since they had known her for some time, it wasn't hard for Wood and Zenith to recognize their old acquaintance. "Thank goodness, Lady Hilda, I'm so relieved to see you're all right," Wood exclaimed. When Wood and Zenith spotted Hilda, she too had noticed them. Wood, now bald and covered in burn scars, wasn't immediately recognized by Hilda, but she quickly recognized Zenith. When the Grey Rat family had first moved to Roa, Hilda had visited them a few times. She had always admired Zenith, not only for her beauty but also for her skills as a high-level mage. As a fellow mother, Hilda had often felt inferior. While she couldn't even raise her own child, Zenith had two well-mannered and talented sons, Wood and Rudy. Hilda had even secretly sought advice from Zenith on how to raise children properly. Looking at Wood and Rudy, who were polite and brilliant, and then looking at her own daughter, Eris. Hilda often wondered if Eris was even her biological child. The moment she saw Zenith, Hilda wanted to call for help, but the bandit standing next to her shot her a menacing look, silently warning her to keep quiet. Fortunately, not only had she spotted Zenith, but Zenith had also noticed her. And when Zenith began walking toward them, Hilda knew she was saved. As Zenith approached with the enormous demon wolf king by her side, the bandits quickly realized things were about to go south. It was clear to anyone with half a brain that Zenith knew Hilda. They didn't know how powerful Zenith was, but the sight of that massive wolf beast was enough to terrify them. At this level of strength, there was no way they could fight off that beast. They wouldn't stand a chance. There weren't enough of them to even slow it down. Realizing that they were doomed, the bandit leader made a desperate move. He pulled out a dagger, intending to stab Hilda and give the order for his men to scatter. But before he could act, a fireball shot past Hilda's shoulder and hit the leader squarely in the head, killing him instantly. Careful. These people aren't merchants. Philip and Lady Hilda have likely been taken hostage. Wood shouted. It was Wood who had cast the fireball from the carriage. As an experienced warrior, Wood could immediately tell from the way these men moved, with their steady steps and fierce gazes, that they weren't ordinary merchants. Besides, they were in the territory of the Holy Kingdom of Milis. Philip and Hilda, as nobles of the Azura Kingdom, wouldn't need this many guards while traveling here. When the other bandits saw their leader fall, they knew things had taken a turn for the worse. They tried to flee in all directions. Uh-oh. But the demon wolf king let out a deafening howl that reverberated through the area, stunning several bandits where they stood. Its pack immediately pounced on the dazed men. What followed was a one-sided massacre. Hilda, who had spent most of her life in the comfort of her estate, had never witnessed anything like this. She nearly collapsed at the sight of the bloodbath in front of her, but Zenith was quick to catch and steady her. Life as an adventurer is like this. If it's not hunting magical beasts, it's being hunted by them. And sometimes it's civil war. It's a profession where you constantly walk the line between life and death. Zenith explained. Hilda had once expressed her envy of the freedom adventurers had, but Zenith's words and the scene before her made it clear that the life of an adventurer was far from the carefree lifestyle Hilda had imagined. Meeting an old acquaintance in a foreign land is a joyous occasion, especially when that acquaintance rescues you from a dire situation. For Hilda and Philip, their relief was palpable. After sharing their experiences over the past few months, Hilda realized how lucky they had been. Had they been transported to the moving labyrinth, like Wood and Zenith, they wouldn't have survived a day, let alone made it out. Looking at Wood now, with his bald head and burn scars, Hilda couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Thank you, Lady Hilda, for your concern. Wood said, noting her worried expression. My burns should be fully healed in a few days. But what do you and Philip plan to do next? We're headed to the capital of Milis to gather information on our missing family members. Will you be traveling with us, or do you plan to stop at the next town? Chapter 283, The Incident at the Gates of Milis City. Faced with Wood's inquiry, Philip hesitated for a moment before deciding to join them on their journey to the capital of the Holy Kingdom of Milis. The reason was simple, both he and Hilda had almost no combat ability. Even though they had escaped the threat of the bandits and Wood had given them some travel funds, there was no guarantee they wouldn't be targeted again. However, if they stayed with Wood's group, the situation would be entirely different. Leaving aside the fighting capabilities of Wood and Zenith, just having that enormous beast outside their carriage gave Philip an immense sense of security. Since your goal is to gather information and find Paul and the others, why not return directly to the Azura Kingdom? If we make it back to the Fitoa territory, the Boreas family has enough resources to send out a large search party to help you find your family. Philip suggested. In truth, Philip was more inclined to return to the Azura Kingdom as soon as possible. In this foreign land, without his noble status and with no real strength of his own, Philip felt vulnerable and powerless. A feeling he was not accustomed to. Perhaps Philip doesn't know yet, but the teleportation disaster affected more than just Roa. The entire Fitoa territory was caught in it. So, the Fitoa territory could already be a wasteland by now. Forget about organizing a search party. Nobody even knows where the residents were teleported to. Furthermore, with such a massive disaster in Fitoa, I doubt the Azura Kingdom's royal family would ignore it. If they can't determine the cause of the disaster, what do you think the royal family will do? Wood said calmly, his eyes sharp. Wood didn't particularly like Philip. With the mind of an adult, he could clearly see that the man was ambitious and cunning. However, Philip was still his father, and during Wood's time living with the Boreas family, Philip had treated him decently. So, Wood decided to offer him some advice. If the royal family can't find out what caused the disaster, they will likely hold the local rulers responsible for the destruction. And that means the Boreas family would be made to take the fall. Philip was no fool. He might have had aspirations of seizing the throne, but he was also politically astute. As soon as Wood mentioned this, Philip immediately understood the gravity of the situation. So, until it's clear how the Azura Kingdom plans to handle the disaster in Fitoa, I recommend that you and Hilda stay put for now. This disaster is too significant for the Azura Kingdom to ignore. The Holy Kingdom of Miles might have some clues about what's going on, and once we learn more, you can make an informed decision about what to do next. Wood's words sent a cold sweat down Philip's neck. Without Wood's warning, he would have walked right back into the Azura Kingdom, only to face execution for the disaster in Fitoa. As the potential heir to the Fitoa territory, Philip realized that if he returned now, the royal family could hold him accountable for everything. In the worst case, he might not survive. After realizing the stakes, Philip no longer objected to going to the Holy Kingdom of Miles. When Wood's group arrived at the capital of Miles, it caused quite a stir. The reason? The Demon Wolf King and its pack refused to stay outside the city gates and insisted on entering to experience human civilization. Moreover, Wood didn't know how long they would need to stay in the city, so after some hesitation, he allowed the Demon Wolf King to enter the city with them. It wasn't uncommon for adventurers to keep magical beasts as pets for various purposes, like sending messages or assisting in battle, so seeing magical beasts in a big city wasn't entirely unusual. The problem was that Wood's magical beasts were anything but ordinary. The Demon Wolf King, standing over 5 meters tall, was nearly half the height of the city gates. So, when it entered the city, it inevitably caused a panic. Despite Wood and his companions raising their hands in a gesture of peace, the city guards still shakily pointed their spears at them, while hastily sending word to the Knight's Order. I told you this would happen. A magical beast of your size entering the city was bound to cause unnecessary fear. Now we're being treated like suspicious characters. Wood muttered in exasperation, glaring at the majestic Demon Wolf beside him. These humans are too easily frightened, judging danger solely by appearances. If I'm considered a threat to this city, what does that make you? You're the one who single-handedly defeated the 9-headed dragon of the moving labyrinth. The Demon Wolf King retorted, a distinctly human-like expression of innocence on its face. It was clearly unhappy with how it was being treated by the humans. Soon enough, a group of knights clad in armor arrived on horseback, responding to the guard's summons. From the way they carried themselves and their gear, it was easy to tell that these knights were no ordinary city guards. They were the elite of the Holy Kingdom of Miles. The knight captain, upon seeing the massive Demon Wolf King, was taken aback. It wasn't that she had never seen a magical beast serving a human before, but this beast was exceptional. Its size was enormous, and its aura was terrifying. It was clearly the king of its kind. A beast king. A magical beast this powerful should possess immense pride. How could it possibly submit to a human? Even more shocking was the sight of the Demon Wolf King's master, a bald, scarred boy who looked no older than a teenager. Who are you, and what business do you have in the capital of the Holy Kingdom of Miles? If you don't give a proper explanation, the Holy Order of the Temple Knights will take you for spies from the Demon Continent and expel you from the city. The knight captain declared. Fairy Slitra hadn't been in her position as captain for long, but if someone as powerful as Wood had existed in the Holy Kingdom of Miles, she would have known about it. The fact that this person could control such a beast meant they weren't ordinary. And just because he looked young didn't mean much. There were many long-lived races on the Demon Continent. For all she knew, the baldness might have been an attempt to obscure his identity. Captain of the Holy Knights, please calm down. We're not from the Demon Continent. We're from the Central Continent, specifically the Azura Kingdom. This beast is my companion. I know its size is intimidating, but I assure you it won't harm anyone in the city. Wood explained. He punctuated his words by kicking the Demon Wolf King playfully, signaling it to show it wasn't a threat. The Demon Wolf King, ever the goofball, responded by sticking out its tongue and wagging its tail furiously like a friendly dog. Chapter 284, Wood, this is your fourth aunt. Seeing the enormous beast in front of her, which exuded a sense of imminent danger, Faris was utterly stunned when it started wagging its tail like a harmless puppy. The once majestic image of the Demon Wolf King had crumbled before her eyes. This wasn't a fearsome wolf king. It was acting like a giant husky. No, I can't allow you into the city just based on your word alone. Even if you really are from the Azura Kingdom, allowing such a dangerous creature into the city is too risky. If something happens, I, Fairy Slitra, would never be able to bear the consequences. So, I'm afraid you'll have to turn around and return the way you came. Fairy said firmly, showing no sign of backing down. Despite the Demon Wolf King acting harmless, Faris wasn't swayed. The beast's mere presence was intimidating enough, And if it turned hostile, the whole city would be thrown into chaos. This knight has a point, Wood muttered, realizing that getting into the city might be harder than anticipated. Just as Wood was preparing to make one last effort to plead his case, the argument seemed to catch the attention of someone inside their carriage. Zenith. As soon as Zenith stepped out of the carriage and overheard the knight captain introducing herself, her face immediately lit up with recognition. Fairy Slitra? Is it really you? How have you been all these years? Zenith asked, her voice filled with excitement. No, it wasn't just Zenith who was emotional. Therese, upon seeing Zenith, was even more moved than her elder sister. Removing her helmet to reveal a delicate face that bore a striking resemblance to Zenith, Therese shouted. Sister Zenith. The two women rushed toward each other, embracing warmly. After their emotional reunion, Zenith pulled Therese over to the group and began introducing her to everyone. Let me introduce you. This is my sister, Therese Litra, the fourth daughter of the Litra family, and your aunt. Zenith announced proudly. When introducing Philip and Hilda, Zenith referred to them as friends. Therese showed little interest in them, but she politely nodded since they were friends of her sister. However, Therese's real focus was on Wood, Norn, and Aisha. After all, Zenith had just called her their aunt. Which meant these children were her nieces and nephews. But which ones? Was it just one of them? Or perhaps all three? Zenith had always had a close relationship with her other sisters, despite her long-standing feud with their mother. Therese, in particular, had always been fond of Zenith, often following her around as a child. This is Aisha Greyrat, the third daughter of our family. And this is Norn Greyrat, the fourth daughter. Zenith explained, introducing Aisha and Norn to her sister. While Zenith was speaking, Wood had been keeping a close eye on Aisha's reaction. For Wood and Norn, Aisha was their sister. They shared the same blood, without a doubt. But for Therese, though she was the aunt of Wood, Norn, and Rudy, Aisha wasn't technically her niece. If Aisha were an ordinary child, Wood wouldn't have worried. But Aisha was an incredibly perceptive and intelligent girl, and with Lilia's upbringing, her emotions were quite sensitive. Wood had been concerned that during the introductions, Aisha might feel left out. However, when Zenith introduced Aisha as the third daughter and made no mention of her not being biologically related, Wood felt a huge weight lift from his shoulders. He noticed Aisha's expression. She seemed frozen in shock. By introducing Aisha as her own child, Zenith had fully embraced her, acknowledging her as part of the family. Zenith had finally come to terms with her feelings and accepted Aisha as her daughter, putting to rest any lingering concerns about rejection. Zenith's introduction served two purposes: first, to ensure Aisha was accepted by the Litra family, and second, to prevent Aisha from overthinking her place in the family. After introducing Aisha and Norn, Zenith then turned her gaze to Wood. And this young man is Wood Greyrat, the second son of our family and the one I'm most proud of. As a mother, she should love all her children equally. However, it was undeniable. Wood made her exceptionally proud. Both Rudy and Wood were intelligent, mature children, but Wood's emotional intelligence and the way he cared for his family set him apart. It wasn't that Rudy wasn't capable, but Wood had a more nuanced approach to family matters, always thinking of everyone's feelings. He was the first to step forward whenever danger loomed, putting himself at risk to protect others. Zenith couldn't deny that during the teleportation disaster, they were incredibly lucky to have had Wood by their side. If not for him, she, Norn, and Aisha likely wouldn't have survived the dangers of the moving labyrinth. Upon hearing Zenith's introduction, Therese's eyes lit up even brighter. She rushed over to Wood and the others, arms wide open for a big hug. Sensing the impending danger, Wood immediately used his instant transmission technique to dodge out of the way, leaving Norn and Aisha trapped in Therese's tight embrace, their faces contorted in discomfort. It was Therese's first time being an aunt, and she was overjoyed. Plus, both Norn and Aisha were incredibly adorable, which made Therese even more excited. However, she quickly realized that one of her nephews had managed to slip away. Therese wasn't just a knight captain, she was also a skilled swordswoman, likely on par with Paul, at the level of an advanced swordsman. Yet, even with her abilities, Wood had easily dodged her. Wow! No wonder Sister Zenith is so proud of you. You may be young, but you're already quite the warrior. But you won't escape your aunt's love that easily. And so, an odd scene unfolded at the city gates. A knight from the Holy Order, clad in full armor, kept trying to bear hug a bald teenager, who effortlessly dodged her every attempt. Chapter 285, The 12-Year-Old Sword King? Therese's personality was quite similar to that of Zenith. Both were competitive and stubborn. She had been chasing after Wood for some time but failed to catch him. Frustrated, Therese eventually removed her heavy knight armor and decided to engage in the pursuit with lighter gear. However, even with her agility, Therese still couldn't even touch the hem of Wood's clothes, despite being breathless from exhaustion. "Zenith, did you secretly cast some kind of spell on that brat Wood?" Therese complained. As Wood's elder and meeting him for the first time, being humiliated in front of a child wasn't something Therese could take lightly. Given that Wood was her sister's son, it meant he was around 10 years old. There was no reason why she, the captain of the Temple Knights, couldn't catch such a young kid. Therese assumed that Zenith must have used some magic to boost her son's abilities. "I didn't do anything. Besides, I don't even know how to use that type of magic," Zenith replied. "Therese, you should just give up. Don't let Wood's age fool you. His swordsmanship is already on par with a Sword King." Seeing Therese's puffed-up, childlike face, Zenith couldn't bear to see her sister struggling in vain after all these years. She decided to reveal Wood's true strength to stop Therese from stubbornly pursuing him. "A Sword King? Are you telling me that a child, barely over 10 years old, has already reached the level of a Sword King?" "Zenith, you must be joking," Therese responded, incredulously. Therese wasn't the only one who found this hard to believe. Even the other Temple Knights nearby shared the same skepticism. A Sword King at 11 or 12? Not even the reincarnation of the Sword God could achieve such a feat at that age. But soon, Therese realized that Zenith wasn't joking. Her sister's expression was completely serious, even showing a hint of helplessness. There was no trace of humor in her face. Therese turned to Wood, who stood nearby with a smile on his face, and asked, "Are you really a Sword King?" "Because of my unique physique, I can't generate any battle aura. So, I'm not sure if I've truly reached the level of a Sword King," Wood humbly replied. "But if I were to face an ordinary Sword Saint, I'm confident I wouldn't lose." Wood's response was modest, yet it still shocked Therese and the other knights. Even if he wasn't a Sword King, being a Sword Saint at the age of 12 was equally outrageous. Most of them still couldn't believe it. But seeing that Therese, an advanced strength swordsman, couldn't even touch Wood, they began to reconsider. Not to mention, the massive magical beast that had previously addressed Wood as master. No ordinary boy could command such a creature. "Wood, stop messing around. Therese is your fourth aunt. What's so bad about letting her give you a hug?" Zenith scolded, asserting her motherly authority. Wood had no choice but to reluctantly comply. Therese beamed as she embraced Wood tightly, even affectionately rubbing her face against his. "Even if you're a genius Sword King, you're still my little nephew. You'd better call me Aunt Therese obediently," she teased. "You've certainly inherited Zenith's good looks, but why did you shave your head? You'd be much more handsome with hair." Wood, caught in Therese's affectionate embrace, looked completely resigned. His shiny bald head became the target of extra attention, solidifying his resolve to find some hair growth formula soon. Though he had lost his hair, it didn't make him any stronger. For the sake of his appearance, he needed to restore his hair as soon as possible. Strength comes and goes, but being handsome lasts forever. Unlike Norn and Aisha, Wood was lucky this time. Since Therese had removed her rigid armor, the forced hug wasn't nearly as painful as what his sisters had experienced. With Therese's assurance, Wood and his group had no problem entering the city. Although some Temple Knights expressed concerns about the direwolf-like magical beast entering the city, Therese overruled them, stating that she, Therese Litra, would take full responsibility for any issues that arose. So, the objections were silenced. The Litra family was a noble house of Miris, highly regarded in the holy country of Milis. With Therese vouching for them, there was no issue. Moreover, through their previous conversations, it became clear that the famed paragon of noble ladies of the Litra family had returned after many years. And she hadn't returned alone. She had brought her child with her, a boy who was already a Sword Saint at the age of 12. Being part of the Litra family, one of the great noble houses of Milis, Therese could easily arrange for lodging for Wood's group. However, Zenith was still stubbornly holding a grudge against her mother and insisted on staying at an inn instead. "Zenith, why don't you just come back home with me? After all these years you've been away, Mother has never stopped thinking about you, even if she never says it out loud." Therese tried to persuade her sister. "There have been several times I've seen her sitting alone in the study, staring at a picture of you. Let the past stay in the past. Even if you don't want to see Mother, you should at least let Wood and the others meet their grandmother. And besides, you must have gone through a lot on your journey, right? The lodging fees in the capital aren't exactly cheap." Upon hearing that her mother often stared at her picture in sorrow, Zenith hesitated for a moment. But when she recalled the harsh words her mother had said before she left, Zenith's brief hesitation gave way to determination. As for the lodging fees, Zenith didn't bother explaining further. She simply tossed out a pile of high-grade magical beast materials and magic crystals. Though they looked ragged from their long journey, The reality was that Wood's group was poor in the sense that they had nothing but money left. Putting aside everything else, just the dragon scales and magic crystals from the nine-headed dragon would be enough for them to buy multiple mansions in the capital if they wanted. Did you wipe out every magical beast in that area? And is this dragon scale? This magic crystal is massive. Therese marveled at their spoils. In the end, she realized the real fool was herself. Chapter 286, Zenith's mother. Originally, Therese had thought that her pampered older sister must have had a difficult time living outside all these years. After all, a sheltered young lady suddenly becoming an adventurer, with no experience or qualifications, it was a miracle that she had survived up until now. However, Therese was surprised to find that not only had her sister not suffered, but she was actually living far better than Therese had imagined. Two adorable daughters, a 12-year-old sword saint son, and even their financial situation seemed no worse than that of the Litra family. Though Therese couldn't identify the specific type of dragon the shimmering scales came from, her trained eyes could tell that the materials were of the highest quality. And those enormous magic crystals, such large specimens were rare even in the Litra family's treasury. In short, aside from not meeting her brother-in-law, Zenith had clearly surpassed all the other noble young ladies from her generation in terms of achievements. Due to Zenith's stubborn nature, Therese was unable to convince her to return to the Litra family's estate. Instead, she found a place to settle Zenith and her family. After finishing her duties with the Night Order and changing into more casual clothes, Therese prepared to visit her sisters for a family reunion that evening. However, a commanding female voice stopped her. "Therese, don't you have something special to tell me today?" Therese froze mid-step. She turned around stiffly to see her mother, Claire, dressed in a blue gown, her light blonde hair now graying with age. "Mother, are you referring to my recent promotion to captain of the Temple Knights?" Therese had been meaning to tell her mother about Zenith, but she feared that their reunion would end in another argument, as it always did. If Zenith were to come home and apologize, Therese was sure their mother would forgive her, and everything would resolve peacefully. But if her mother found out that Zenith had returned to the capital without showing any remorse, she would undoubtedly be furious. "I know full well about your promotion, Therese, and that I had to pull some strings for you. Do you really think I wouldn't know that? Stop playing dumb. You know I'm talking about Zenith and her children. What's going on?" The moment Claire mentioned Zenith and her kids, Therese knew there was no hiding it anymore. But that wasn't surprising. The commotion caused by Wood's magical beast at the gate had drawn too much attention, and as the Litra family was a noble house, news spread quickly. Typically, her mother, Claire, would be in the study at this hour, but she was clearly waiting to confront Therese. "If you care so much about Sister Zenith, why not go see her yourself? You're such a stubborn old woman." Therese mumbled under her breath. "What did you say, Therese? Speak up." Claire's tone sharpened, clearly not amused. Therese had no choice but to abandon her plans of a sisters' reunion, as she was promptly dragged back to the study, where her mother interrogated her about everything that had happened. It wasn't until late into the night that Therese was finally allowed to leave. Only after Therese had left did Claire, who had been sitting stiffly in her chair, visibly relax, as though a weight had been lifted from her. Had Therese not left entirely, she would have been shocked to see her usually prideful and stubborn mother shedding tears as she gazed out at the moonlight, her hands clasped in prayer. Wood and Rudy were almost 12 years old now, not even counting Zenith's years as an adventurer. That meant Zenith had left the Litra family at least 12 years ago. When Zenith had first run away from home, Claire had assumed her pampered daughter would be unable to handle the hardships of life outside and would soon return, begging for forgiveness. But Claire had never imagined that Zenith would stay away for over a decade. For the first few years, Claire had quietly sent people to search for her daughter. But after 10 years had passed with no trace of Zenith, Claire finally gave up. The Litra family had scoured the entire Holy Millie's kingdom and the neighboring countries, but Zenith was nowhere to be found. At one point, Claire even believed that something tragic must have happened to her daughter, which explained her quiet moments of sorrow over the years. No parent can truly forget about their child, no matter how stubborn or prideful they may be. Claire, who was strict not only with others but with herself, was no different. During Zenith's absence, Claire had constantly prayed to the Millie's God for her daughter's safety, all the while regretting her past actions. Thankfully, it seemed her prayers had been answered. Zenith had returned safely. Claire desperately wanted to see the daughter she had longed for over the past decade, and to meet the grandchildren she had never seen. But as the head of the Litra family, Claire's pride wouldn't allow her to make the first move. As both the family head and a mother, Claire refused to be the one to bend first. If anyone was going to apologize, it would have to be that ungrateful Zenith. What Claire didn't know, however, was that Therese had witnessed this emotional moment from the doorway. Hidden from view, Therese watched her mother pray, feeling both amused and exasperated. Their family was full of stubborn people. Despite caring deeply for each other, none of them were willing to back down. It looks like I'll have to be the one to bring mother and sister back together again, Therese thought with a smile. Meanwhile, back at an inn far from the Litra estate, Zenith was also awake, lost in thought as she gazed in the direction of her family home. Sensing his mother's emotions, Wood took Norn and Aisha to give Zenith some space. The two girls, unaware of the adults' worries, were simply excited to spend the night with their brother. After all, their big brother Wood not only knew everything, but he also told them all sorts of stories they had never heard before to lull them to sleep. Chapter 287, Is this kid the highest-ranked adventurer? The next day, after the intense battle in the mobile labyrinth and several days of non-stop travel, Wood was feeling mentally exhausted. So, after telling his sisters a story last night, he quickly fell into a deep sleep. It wasn't until this morning, when he felt something strange on his face, that he was awakened from his dreams. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was an extremely beautiful face, watching him from a very close distance. As soon as she noticed he was awake, the woman flashed a bright smile and quickly leaned her face even closer. "Good morning, nephew. How did you sleep?" Looking at his Aunt Therese, who hugged him without hesitation, Wood could only sigh in resignation. His nerves had been so on edge lately that he slept too deeply last night, not even realizing when Therese entered their room. "Aunt Therese, aren't you the captain of the Temple Knights? Don't you have work today?" Wood wasn't particularly good at dealing with his young aunt. Although Therese was his mother Zenith's sister, there was quite an age gap between them. In fact, when Zenith left home, Therese had been only about 10 years old. So Therese was only a little over 10 years older than Wood himself, but the strange generational difference made Wood feel somewhat uncomfortable. "Even the righteous Temple Knights need a break now and then. I took a day off today specifically to show you around the capital. Your attitude is really making your poor aunt sad, you know." Therese pretended to look hurt, which made Wood sigh once again. It was obvious that this was her first time playing the role of an elder, so he decided to humor her. Besides, as the captain of the Temple Knights, she probably knew a bit about the teleportation disaster in the Fitoa region. "Well then, I'll leave it to you, Aunt Therese, to give me a good tour of the capital. As for Norn and Aisha, they're both exhausted. Let's let them rest for now." Wood gently got out of bed, making sure not to wake his two sleeping sisters, then carefully tucked the blankets around them. He turned to Therese with a smile. "It seems like you and Sister Zenith both really care for your sisters. You don't look that old, but you give off a very reliable vibe. Now I'm even more curious. What kind of person are your father and brother?" Hearing her question, images of Paul and Rudy's lecherous grins flashed through Wood's mind, and he could only give a distracted answer. "They're decent people. Yeah, I guess." The capital of the Holy Millie's kingdom was quite prosperous, even more so than Roa, the city Wood had previously stayed in. Due to the religious nature of the country, many statues were erected along the streets, presumably of the Millie's god. Therese first took Wood to a famous magic tool shop, where they bought a bottle of expensive hair growth serum. Thanks to the serum's effects, Wood's shiny bald head quickly sprouted a mane of bright golden hair again. Wanting to further distinguish himself from Rudy, Wood decided to use an extra-large dose of the serum, allowing his hair to grow all the way down to his waist. He tied it into a ponytail. It was undeniable that hair made a significant difference in someone's appearance. When Therese saw the transformation from a bald head to a handsome young man with flowing golden locks, her eyes lit up. She immediately tried to hug him again, but Wood, having anticipated her move, dodged out of the way just in time. After handling the hair situation, Therese took Wood on a tour around the capital. However, Wood seemed somewhat distracted throughout the tour, until they arrived at the Adventurers Guild. Every country had adventurers, and in larger towns, an Adventurers Guild was always present. Wood, now flush with funds, wanted to go to the guild to post some requests and see if any adventurers had recently returned from the Fitoa region, hoping to learn more about the situation there. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Is this for real? Even a big shot from the Temple Knights would come to a place like this, where us lowly adventurers hang out. Compared to other kingdoms, the adventurer profession wasn't as highly regarded in the Holy Millie's kingdom. So, when the adventurers in the guild saw Therese, the captain of the Temple Knights, entering the guild, they couldn't help but sneer. "Are you here to post a request?" The receptionist, visibly surprised to see a Temple Knight, nonetheless followed protocol as she addressed Therese and Wood. "That's right. I want to post an S-ranked request, to gather information on the cause of the teleportation disaster in the Fitoa region of the Azura Kingdom. I also want to post an E-ranked request to search for Paul Greyrat, Rudy Greyrat, Lelia Greyrat, and Erisporius Greyrat. Anyone who finds any one of these people will be considered to have completed an E-ranked request." As Wood's calm voice echoed throughout the Adventurers Guild, the bustling adventurers fell silent. That's a lot of money. An S-ranked request and more than 5 A-ranked requests. Just the rewards alone must cost a fortune. Whose kid is this, anyway? Could he be royalty? The adventurers didn't know what the teleportation disaster was all about, but a search mission being classified as an E-ranked request. To them, it seemed like easy money. The receptionist kept a professional smile but couldn't hide her surprise. There's no problem with posting the requests, sir, but... Clink. Before she could finish her sentence, Wood tossed a heavy bag of gold onto the counter. From the sound of it, there were quite a few coins inside. I am familiar with the guild's rules. This is the deposit for the requests, and there's more than enough in here. As for the S-ranked request, I believe the guild's rules state that only nobles or S-ranked adventurers and above can post one, correct? Here's my adventurer's ID. I'm registered in the Azura Kingdom as an SS-ranked adventurer. My name is Wood Greyrat. S-ranked requests were notoriously difficult, often requiring multiple S-ranked adventurer teams to work together, which is why they had such high requirements. Chapter 288, Returning to Mother's ancestral home. When Wood and Therese walked out of the Adventurers Guild, the adventurers who had been shocked earlier finally snapped out of it. At first, they thought Wood was the child of some noble family, perhaps even royalty. But none of them expected that the young boy was actually an SS-ranked adventurer. The highest level for quest commissions was S-rank, but for adventurer teams, the highest rank was SS. However, even S-ranked adventurers were extremely rare, and those ranked higher than S were almost non-existent. An S-ranked adventurer was already considered a high-level profession, while SS-ranked adventurers were often at the saint level. Once someone reached the saint level, they were highly sought after by kings and nobles, treated as honored guests wherever they went. There was no need to risk their lives as adventurers anymore. That's why finding an S-ranked adventurer was difficult, but finding an SS-ranked one was practically impossible. Yet the young, golden-haired boy from earlier, who seemed only around 11 or 12 years old, was such a rare SS-ranked adventurer. In other words, that boy was someone whose strength rivaled a saint-level profession. At first, everyone thought Wood was just bragging when he said those things. But after the guild staff repeatedly verified his documents, they discovered that everything was legitimate. The absurd number of completed quests and his 100% completion rate left even the receptionist astonished. I remember now. There is a sword saint who's 11 or 12 years old. Did you guys hear about what happened at the city gate yesterday? You mean the giant magical beast and the mysterious boy who overpowered the captain of the Temple Knights? The incident at the gate had caused quite a stir by now. They had been talking about it while drinking the day before, so everyone knew about it. Are you saying that the boy who just left was the mysterious figure from the gate? The master of that giant magical beast? But the rumors said he was a towering, 8-foot-tall bald boy with an equally massive waist. The boy who just left looked like a refined noble with elegant manners. Because an 11 or 12-year-old sword saint seemed so far-fetched, the adventurers had treated it like a joke. Have you ever seen an SS-ranked adventurer that young? And as for the whole 8-foot-tall bald boy with a massive waist thing, maybe that was just an exaggerated rumor. Don't forget, the boy was accompanied by someone from the Temple Knights. As they left the Adventurers Guild, Therese looked down at Wood, who was a full 2 heads shorter than her, filled with curiosity. Although she had seen a bit of Wood's abilities before, Therese had always doubted the idea that her nephew was a sword saint. But now, she no longer had any doubts. To become an SS-ranked adventurer, one not only had to complete a ridiculous number of quests but also defeat saint-level magical beasts. That was something no high-level swordsman or magician could accomplish. It was also worth noting that most adventurers completed their quests in groups to ensure their safety. Yet, Wood's adventurer team consisted only of himself. This meant that Wood wasn't just a sword saint. He was an extraordinary one. Instead of posting commissions at the Adventurers Guild, wouldn't it be better to seek information about the Fitoa teleportation disaster from the temple or your grandmother? For matters on a national scale like this, Mother would certainly know something. If she wanted, she could easily gather even more information. Therese now fully understood the disaster that had scattered Wood's family across the world and promptly offered him a more practical solution. Aunt Therese, this was your plan all along, wasn't it? You said you were taking a day off to show me around the capital, but really, you just want me to be the mediator between my mother and grandmother, right? Her small scheme uncovered, Therese stuck out her tongue, playfully admitting to it. Indeed, her real plan wasn't just to show Wood, Norn, and Aisha around the capital. Therese intended to bring them back to the Litra family estate. Instead of waiting for her strong-willed sister and mother to reconcile, Therese figured it would be easier to find another way to break the tension. Wood and his 2 sisters were the perfect solution. Therese intended to use them to soften the situation, hoping Wood would act as a bridge between his mother and grandmother, Claire. Given Claire's deep longing for Zenith over the years, combined with Wood's impressive achievements, Therese believed this family conflict could be resolved. As they walked and talked, they soon arrived in front of a luxurious mansion. The guards standing at the gate immediately straightened up and bowed when they saw Therese. "Welcome back, Lady Therese." It became clear that from the start, Therese had been leading Wood toward the Luttra family home. By the time Wood realized it, they were already standing at the mansion's gate. The massive blue building, the iron gate coated in gold, and the sprawling garden filled with rare flowers were all in plain view. Just from looking at the exterior, Wood could tell that the Luttra family was even wealthier than the Boreas family, where he had stayed before. But that wasn't surprising. After all, the Boreas family was only a regional lord, while the Luttra family was a noble house situated in the royal capital. Moreover, Philip wasn't even the head of the Boreas family, whereas Claire Luttra, Zenith's mother, was the head of the entire Luttra family. "This is Wood Greyrat, my sister's son. You should get to know him. This will be his home from now on. If he ever wants to come home, you know what to do, right?" After hearing Therese's introduction, the guards immediately bowed again, this time to Wood. "It's an honor to meet you, Master Wood." Seeing the guards bowing to him, Wood felt a bit awkward. He had still been hesitant about whether to enter the Luttra family estate, but Therese had already gone ahead and announced his identity. Not wanting to appear rude, Wood responded with a polite knight's salute, his good manners shining through. What he didn't notice was that, from the window in the mansion, a pair of eyes was watching him. When Claire Luttra saw Wood's respectful gesture, she nodded in approval, a satisfied smile briefly crossing her face. Chapter 289, First Meeting with Grandma Claire. Whether or not to acknowledge Wood as a legitimate member of the family wasn't something Therese had the authority to decide. Only Claire, the head of the Luttra family, could make that call. The fact that the guards had directly addressed Wood as Master Wood made it clear that someone had already informed them of his arrival. Since they were already at the Luttra family estate, and with Therese giving him a gentle nudge, Wood was practically half pushed into entering the manor. Before they went inside, Therese grew concerned. Knowing this was Wood's first time meeting her mother, Claire, she worried that his behavior might displease her. All the way there, she kept giving Wood a crash course on her mother's temperament, likes, and dislikes. Through Therese's descriptions, Wood began to get an idea of what his grandmother, whom he had never met, might be like. Usually, Claire Luttra would either be at the royal palace or busy handling family affairs at home during this time. However, today, she had unexpectedly chosen to enjoy some tea in the backyard. Therese had planned to give Wood some last-minute tips on how to win her mother's favor. But when they arrived in the garden and saw Claire elegantly sipping her tea, Therese froze. She hadn't mentally prepared herself for this sudden encounter with her mother. Sipping tea in the backyard wasn't all that strange in itself, but this was Claire Luttra they were talking about. The woman was a known workaholic. When did she start indulging in leisurely tea time? Therese, if I'm not mistaken, this should still be working hours for the temple knights. Care to explain why you're here instead? Claire held her teacup in one hand, sitting with perfect posture. Even during her rare moments of leisure, her every action was precise and impeccable. Though Therese was usually lively and energetic, her mother's commanding gaze seemed to shrink her down into submission. Once Claire had subdued her daughter's apparent rebellion with just a look, she turned her attention to Wood. After a long, scrutinizing stare at him, Claire shifted her gaze back to Therese, clearly expecting an explanation. But before Therese, who was now wearing an expression of utter distress, could gather her thoughts, Wood took the initiative to introduce himself. "Pleased to meet you, Lady Claire. My name is Wood Greyrat. My mother is Zenith Greyrat, and my father is Paul Greyrat. I am the second son of our family, and I've come on behalf of my mother to pay my respects. I apologize for showing up unannounced, it was quite presumptuous of me. This is a gift my mother asked me to bring for you. I hope you will accept it, Lady Claire." As Wood finished his speech, which was laced with formality and a hint of remorse, he followed it up with an impeccably executed noble's bow. Therese stood there, dumbfounded. She hadn't even figured out how to introduce her nephew, yet here he was, performing a flawless noble greeting, complete with a formal apology. Both his choice of words and the precision of his actions were so impeccable that Therese couldn't find a single fault. No. Actually, she even thought Wood's performance was better than what her court etiquette teacher had taught her back in the day. Then, when Wood presented the elegantly wrapped gift, Therese was utterly bewildered. She hadn't even known he had prepared a gift. Greyrat. So, that's the man she chose, huh? If she knows she was wrong, why didn't she cane herself this time? Instead, she sent you. Does she even regard me as her mother anymore? The moment Claire heard Wood's words, the teacup in her hand shattered with a sharp crack. The tea spilled onto her blue gown, But she didn't seem to care. She continued to fix Wood with a piercing gaze. Seeing her mother's fury, Therese was completely panicked. This wasn't how she had imagined things playing out at all. But despite the panic on Therese's face, Wood maintained a composed exterior, though his expression showed a touch of fear. In reality, he was utterly calm. Thanks to his keen sense of magic, he could clearly detect the flow of mana around Claire when the teacup broke. In other words, the cup hadn't shattered because of Claire's anger causing her mana to go haywire. She had done it intentionally. From what Therese had told him, Wood knew that his grandmother was a headstrong, stubborn woman with a strict adherence to etiquette and appearances. She demanded perfection not only from mothers but from herself as well. Wood's respectful introduction had already gained him quite a bit of favor in Claire's eyes. Additionally, Claire's guilt over how things had turned out with Zenith meant that deep down, she had likely already forgiven her daughter. Otherwise, she wouldn't have allowed the guards to refer to Wood as Master Wood. As for why Claire had put on an angry front, Wood suspected it was a matter of pride. She was struggling to reconcile her emotions with her dignity and needed a way to back down gracefully. After all, someone as stubborn and prideful as Claire couldn't just forgive her daughter without any pretense. How could she face herself if she did? As expected, after throwing her brief tantrum, Claire excused herself to change her clothes, leaving Wood with a promise that she would speak with him about the rules of the Litra family once she returned. Therese was completely flabbergasted. Just moments ago, her mother had seemed on the verge of throwing Wood out. Yet now it appeared that Claire intended to let him stay. Wood and Therese didn't have to wait long before Claire returned, now dressed in a fresh, elegant gown. Her demeanor was composed and formal, as though her earlier outburst had never happened. Wood Greyrat, I don't know much about your father, but it seems that while Zenith may be a disrespectful daughter, she has raised you quite well. Zenith was once hailed as the model noblewoman here in the capital, thanks to my teachings. However, in terms of manners and noble bearing, I believe you have surpassed even her. I've also learned some things about you already. Beyond your impeccable noble etiquette, it seems you're an accomplished warrior as well. Let's see if your skills are as impressive as your other qualities. Chapter 290, Not Just a Sword Saint. As he watched Claire Litra, his grandmother, draw her magic staff, Wood realized this was a test from her. On one hand, she wanted to understand her grandson better. On the other hand, she likely wanted to see if Zenith had raised Wood as impressively as she had hoped. Therese, lend him your sword. Even the most talented swordsman can't win against a mage without a weapon, right? Wood had already sensed Claire's magical abilities and knew roughly how powerful she was. Out of respect for her as an elder, he initially wanted to decline. However, seeing the serious expression on his grandmother's face and the fact that she even asked Therese to lend him a sword, Wood could only sigh in resignation. Wood, be careful. Don't let her age fool you. Mother was once a member of the Temple Knights. She may not be in her prime anymore, but as a devout follower of Millie's, she's a water saint level mage and also has decent sword skills. Hearing Therese's words, Wood glanced at Claire with a hint of surprise. He wasn't shocked that she was a water saint level mage. After all, Zenith's magical talent didn't come from nowhere. What surprised him was that in her youth, Claire Lita wasn't just a water saint level mage. She also possessed swordsmanship skills comparable to an advanced swordsman. This was the first time Wood had encountered someone who excelled in both swordsmanship and magic. Horace and Ghislaine had impressive swordsmanship, but their magic was terrible. They could barely manage the most basic spells. Rudius, on the other hand, was incredibly talented in magic, but despite training with Paul and receiving guidance from masters like Ghislaine and Ruijerd, he had only reached the level of a mid-level swordsman. Don't hold back because you're worried about hurting me. Use your full strength, Claire said, her tone firm. Claire's magic staff was unique. It was longer than a typical staff, and the material didn't look like ordinary wood. When she held it, it looked both like a staff and a slender sword. Claire had made sure to gather information about Wood beforehand. She was quite pleased to learn that her grandson possessed sword saint level strength. But she didn't know the full extent of his abilities, which was why she intended to test him herself. As for whether or not Wood's full strength would harm her, Claire wasn't concerned. Even if Wood truly had the skills of a sword saint, she was no pushover. With water saint level magic and advanced swordsmanship, Claire had no fear of facing a sword saint in battle. In that case, please excuse me, Lady Claire. Do be careful, Wood replied. Instead of accepting the knight's sword that Therese handed him, a blue magic circle appeared in his right hand, and in the next moment, a blade made of swirling water formed in his grip. Wood, you can use magic too? Therese exclaimed. He didn't even chant. The spell was cast without an incantation. Claire added, equally astonished. Both women were shocked, but for different reasons. Therese, as the captain of the Temple Knights, was amazed that Wood, who already possessed Sword Saint level skills, had also mastered magic. At just 11 or 12 years old, being a Sword Saint was already an extraordinary feat. But Wood had somehow found the time to train in magic as well. Claire, on the other hand, was less surprised that Wood could use both swordsmanship and magic. After all, she had done the same in her youth. What truly shocked her was that Wood could cast magic without chanting, a skill long thought to be exclusive to the gods. Yet, here was her grandson, doing just that. Though Claire had told Wood to give it his all, would he really go all out? Of course not. A Sword Saint? That was only his level when using the sword styles of this world. If Wood employed his own Hyaki Yagio sword style, he could easily rival a Sword King. As for his magic, before facing the Hydra, Wood had already reached king-level magic. But after absorbing a large portion of the magic crystal from the moving labyrinth, both his magic capacity and quality had surged. Now, his water and fire magic had reached Emperor level, and his other elemental magics had achieved king-level status as well. And whether it was swordsmanship or magic, if Wood tapped into the power of Heart of God, his strength would increase even further. Claire Litra was indeed powerful and one of the strongest in the Holy Kingdom of Miles. But to Wood, if he were to truly unleash his full power, Claire wouldn't last more than 3 moves against him. Seeing that Claire had begun chanting her spell, Wood didn't stand idle. In an instant, he charged toward her. With a powerful kick off the ground, the stone tiles beneath Wood's feet cracked like a spider's web. Using the force of the recoil, Wood closed the distance between himself and Claire in a single breath. Such speed! Claire muttered in surprise as she saw Wood rapidly approaching. If he had been facing an ordinary mage, getting this close before they could finish their spell would have secured an easy victory. But Claire was no ordinary mage. With her advanced level swordsmanship, she wasn't overwhelmed by Wood's speed. With a quick push off her heels, Claire performed a backward leap, narrowly dodging Wood's water blade. His strike was so close that it sliced off a few strands of her pale golden hair as it passed. Advanced water magic, raise orphan shark. As Claire dodged, she completed her spell. A large, blue magic circle formed in front of her, and from it emerged a massive shark made entirely of water. With razor-sharp teeth bared, it lunged at Wood. Wood had already closed the gap between them, so Claire's spell was cast at point-blank range. Even a Sword Saint would have found it impossible to dodge at such close range. Chapter 291, What has this kid been eating to grow so strong? Has Mother gone mad? Wasn't she just supposed to test Wood's abilities? Why is she getting so serious now? Wood is my sister's child. What if he gets hurt? Seeing Claire use advanced magic right from the start, Therese became frantic. She thought her mother was going too far. Even if Claire still held a grudge against Zenith, that was no reason to take it out on a child. Just as Therese was about to step in and stop the battle, someone behind her placed a hand on her shoulder. Please wait a moment, Lady Therese. Lady Claire has no intention of harming Master Wood. She only wants to see his true strength, which is why she had us standing by. The person who appeared behind her was the Litra family's butler, accompanied by a temple knight who specialized in healing magic. Both were skilled advanced mages. Their purpose for being there was, of course, by Claire's order, to be ready to heal any injuries sustained during the spar. As the enormous, toothy shark made of water lunged at Wood, everyone present thought he was bound to get hurt. However, Wood quickly proved that his abilities far surpassed their expectations. With the giant water shark about to bite down on him, Wood swiftly formed a water blade in his hand. With lightning speed, he sliced downward at the approaching shark. Unlike typical magic attacks or techniques reliant on energy, the arc of his blade created a slash so powerful it split the massive shark in two, leaving a deep gouge in the ground. He used magic to cut through magic. Therese stared, dumbfounded by what she had just witnessed. She had seen plenty of mages before, but using magic in such a way during combat was a first for her. No. It wasn't just magic. The slash that cut through Lady Claire's water magic. It looked like magic, but I didn't feel any mana at all. That means it wasn't magic. What he used was some kind of combat technique, one we've never seen before. Therese had assumed Wood was using magic, but the butler and the temple knight healer, both experts in magic, knew better. Wood hadn't used any magic at all. Wood, having effortlessly cleaved the water shark in half, didn't stop there. He quickly closed the distance between himself and Claire, pressing the attack. Realizing she didn't have time to chant a spell, Claire gripped her staff tightly and used it like a sword to block Wood's strikes. Claire was trained in the water god style of swordsmanship, and her staff, crafted entirely of mithril, not only served as a conduit for magic but also as a formidable longsword. Wood, however, was using the sword god style, which focused heavily on offense. Given that his skill in swordsmanship exceeded Claire's, even with her proficiency in the defensive water god style, She found herself continually forced back. Claire had once been an advanced level water god-style swordswoman. Though she was no longer in her prime, the fact that Wood could pressure her like this only confirmed his status as a sword saint. Just as Wood thought it might be time to ease up and let his elder save face by conceding the duel, he noticed a sudden smile spread across Claire's face. The sword god style is indeed powerful and aggressive. Your unique combat techniques are also quite impressive. But focusing only on the enemy in front of you while ignoring threats from behind. Well, that's a dangerous mistake to make. Hearing Claire's words, Wood quickly turned around in shock, only to realize that he had fallen into her trap. The massive water shark he had sliced in half hadn't disappeared. Instead, the two halves of the shark had split into two large masses of water, now floating ominously behind him. With a wave of her mithril staff, Claire forced Wood back. Her mana surged, and the floating water masses transformed into a swarm of deadly piranhas. Don't forget, child, I am a sound-level water mage. Against someone with greater swordsmanship, why wouldn't I rely on my superior magic instead of swordplay? The piranhas, born from water, moved through the air at terrifying speed, quickly encircling Wood. The butler and temple knight healer, thinking the match was over, started moving forward to heal Wood. But just as they stepped forward, they saw Wood draw a magic staff from his back. In the next moment, they felt a massive surge of mana, and the air around them grew suddenly and intensely hot. No way. Fire Saint magic, Crimson Nova. In the stunned silence that followed, a crimson magic circle appeared on the ground. A towering pillar of fire shot up from the Litra Estate's garden, sending a wave of heat washing over everything. The roaring flames, upon exploding into existence, not only raised the temperature to scorching levels but also instantly vaporized the water piranhas surrounding Wood, turning them into steam. A saint-level fire mage. This boy can't be more than 15, right? As the flames gradually died down and the charred earth came into view, the temple knight, a healer who specialized in magic, muttered to himself in disbelief as he stared at Wood. Lady Therese, didn't you say Master Wood was a sword saint? What in the world is going on here? Not only the temple knight but also the Litra family's elderly butler looked stunned. His gaze shifted to Therese, hoping for some explanation. However, what the butler didn't know was that Therese was just as shocked as they were. The earlier battle had convinced everyone that Wood was indeed at a sword saint level of swordsmanship. But what no one had anticipated was that Wood was not only a sword saint. He was also a saint-level fire mage. Up until now, Therese had believed that in her mother's youth, Claire had been something of a prodigy, blessed by the gods with both immense talent in magic and remarkable skill in swordsmanship. But now, Therese realized that her mother paled in comparison. Her nephew was the real prodigy. At just 12 years old, Wood had already become a rare SS-level adventurer, possessed sword saint-level swordsmanship, and had reached the rank of fire saint as a mage. Moreover, whether it was his swordsmanship or his magic, it was clear that Wood wasn't your typical saint-level combatant. He had mastered both combat techniques and enchantless magic. Chapter 292, I surrender. Thank you, Lady Claire. I surrender in this match. Thank you, Lady Claire, for going easy on me. Otherwise, with my abilities, I certainly wouldn't have been a match for you. Both of them were strong in both swordsmanship and magic. However, Claire's swordsmanship was not as refined as Wood's, and she also didn't have the advantage of casting magic without incantations like he did. That said, Claire possessed something Wood didn't. Battle experience. In terms of swordsmanship, that might be one thing, but when it came to magical power and combat tactics, Wood couldn't even come close to her. Originally, Therese had believed her nephew could fight on equal footing with her mother, perhaps even win. But to her surprise, Wood admitted defeat so quickly and decisively. Did Mother really go easy on him? Because I couldn't tell at all. Therese's voice slipped out at an inopportune moment, prompting the old butler nearby to cough repeatedly, warning her to hold her tongue. A quick glance at her mother's dangerous glare made Therese realize her mistake. Wood glanced sympathetically at his dazed aunt. Why had Wood surrendered? Was it because he truly wasn't as skilled or because his body wasn't in peak condition? Of course not. The real reason was that, as the younger person in front of an elder, especially with other onlookers present, this was the most appropriate course of action. From what Therese had told him, and from his brief interaction with Claire, Wood had already gauged her personality. Since she was a proud and stubborn woman, losing to her 12-year-old grandson in front of others would have been humiliating. Claire had even brought 2 skilled healing mages ahead of time, just in case Wood got hurt. Now imagine if the healers, who were meant to tend to Wood, ended up treating Claire instead. How would Claire, as the head of the Litra family, save face? Wood wasn't here to add to the bad blood between his mother and grandmother, he was here to smooth things over. He knew exactly what the best course of action was in this situation. Unfortunately, His well-meaning yet naive Aunt Therese hadn't realized the delicate nature of the moment, and her words had only made things worse for Claire. "Aunt Therese, I really wasn't a match for Lady Claire," Wood said quickly, trying to smooth over the situation. "If she hadn't warned me about the danger behind me, I would have been caught off guard. Besides, my magic reserves are quite limited. After summoning the water blade and casting the fire saint level spell, most of my magic power was nearly depleted. For mages, overexerting their magic comes with significant risks, so I lost this match fair and square." Wood's explanation was reasonable, and even those present couldn't find fault with his reasoning. After all, Wood was only 12 years old and had already reached the level of a fire saint. It wasn't surprising that his magic reserves were limited at his age. Moreover, even if others had doubts, none of them would have been foolish enough to voice them as openly as Therese had, effectively putting Claire in a difficult position. "Morty Eel, thank you for your assistance. You can return to the temple now. The rest is a Litra family matter, so it wouldn't be appropriate for you to stay." Hearing Claire's words, the temple knight, who had been standing in the background for a while, respectfully bowed and left without any sign of displeasure. After all, besides being the head of the Litra family, Claire's late husband had once been the captain of the temple knight's sword unit. "Madam, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave as well," the old butler said, bowing politely and excusing himself. Now that all outsiders had left, only Wood, Claire, and Therese remained in the now destroyed backyard following their sparring match. "Since you're now officially employed by the temple knights, you need to learn to be more independent. Don't expect to get any more allowance from me," Claire said sharply. At her words, Therese's face immediately fell, like a wilted flower. Sure, being a temple knight came with a salary, but for a girl used to spending lavishly, that meager income was barely enough to get by. After dealing with Therese's finances, Claire turned her gaze to Wood, her stern expression softening into something akin to pride. "Child, you've exceeded my expectations in many ways," she said warmly. "What's even more remarkable is that despite your immense talent and power, your heart and wisdom are just as extraordinary. I'm curious, what kind of environment fostered someone as outstanding as you? Don't tell me it's all thanks to your mother's teaching. No one knows Zenith better than I do. She's not exactly what I'd call a wise person." Ouch. Claire's blunt words effectively threw all her children under the bus. How would Zenith and Therese feel hearing this? Well, based on Wood's understanding of the two sisters, they weren't exactly shining examples of high intelligence. Therese was one thing, but Zenith had almost been sold into slavery at one point. Aside from Zenith and Therese, did the Litra family have any other siblings? Of course they did. Zenith was the second daughter, and Therese was the fourth. As for the eldest and third daughters, Wood hadn't met them. Perhaps they had died in battle or were stationed elsewhere, but either way, none of the Litra children had come close to their mother's level of talent and strength. Among her children, Claire had the highest hopes for Zenith, which was why she had raised her to be the perfect noble lady. But no one had anticipated that Zenith would rebel against noble customs and arranged marriages, ultimately severing ties with her mother and leaving home. "You're too kind, Lady Claire," Wood replied with humility. "I just enjoyed reading books when I was younger, so I've learned a bit more than others. As for my swordsmanship and magic, I was lucky enough to have met excellent and dedicated teachers, which is why I've achieved what I have today." Wood's humble response earned even more approval from Claire. However, her expression showed slight dissatisfaction with one particular detail. What was this? He calls Therese aunt, but addresses her as Lady Claire? Chapter 293, Will Wood be adopted into the Litra family? Ahem, since you've passed my test and you do indeed carry half of the Litra family's blood, you may call me grandmother from now on, Claire said. Wood could clearly sense a slight wavering in Claire's tone. It was obvious that, for her, saying these words was no small feat. "Your magic and swordsmanship. Were they all taught to you by your parents?" Claire asked, her voice thoughtful. "When we fought earlier, I could tell that you didn't use your full strength, did you? Apart from the fire saint level magic, you must have held something back." Claire wasn't just proud of her grandson. She was also deeply curious. Up until now, no matter how strict she was with people, she couldn't find a single flaw in Wood. Perfect noble manners, a composed mind, a strong character, and above all, extraordinary talent and strength. For someone as strict as Claire, encountering such perfection only made her more eager to protect and cherish it. To her, Wood was that perfection embodied. Zenith and Paul, my parents, did teach me the basics, but I've also had the fortune of meeting other exceptional teachers. Without their guidance, I wouldn't be where I'm today. As for holding back, well, I did keep a tiny bit in reserve. Besides the fire saint level magic, I've also mastered saint level spells in water, earth, and wind, including healing magic. Wood replied humbly. Despite being mentally prepared, Claire couldn't help but be startled when Wood revealed a portion of his true abilities. As for Therese, she had become entirely numb to the shock at this point. She felt like her nephew was some kind of beast raised on magical feed. Every time she thought she had him figured out, he revealed yet another jaw-dropping secret. First, she believed they were on the same level, but then he turned out to be a sword saint. When she adjusted to that revelation, he revealed his identity as an SS-ranked adventurer. And just as she was getting used to that, Wood whipped out a magic staff and casually cast fire salt-level spells, proving he wasn't just a swordsman, but a magical prodigy as well. And now, after marveling at how he held his own against her mother, Wood nonchalantly admitted he hadn't even been fighting at full strength. He was actually a master of all attributes at the saint level. He was only 12 years old. When Therese was 12, she was just an apprentice swordsman, dreaming of a bright future and comfortably asking her parents for pocket money. But her freakishly talented nephew? At 12, he was already a sword saint, an SS-ranked adventurer, and a saint-level mage in all elements. I've had the butler prepare rooms for you. It's hardly appropriate for members of the Litter family to be staying in some small inn. You can bring your sisters over at any time. As for Zenith, if she wants to return, she can. If not, well, that's her choice, Claire said, before turning and walking away. After witnessing Wood's incredible talent, a new, half-formed idea had begun to take root in Claire's mind. Would Zenith return to the Litter family? Knowing her daughter as well as she did, Claire thought that once Wood and his sisters were living at the Litter estate, Zenith would inevitably follow. From the task Wood had requested earlier, Claire also learned that the Fitoa region where Wood's family had lived had been completely destroyed. Given that, settling down in the kingdom of Millies seemed like a very real possibility for Wood and his siblings. Moreover, Wood had revealed that he was only the second son of the Grey Rat family. In the kingdom of Aja, family inheritance typically went to the eldest child. In other words, as the second son, Wood would have no claim to the Grey Rat family's inheritance. This realization sparked a new idea in Claire's mind. Perhaps Wood could be adopted into the Litter family and inherit the Litter estate. Currently, though the Litter family held the prestigious title of Count, the internal family dynamics were precarious. Claire's husband was dead, her children were less than capable, and several side branches of the family were eyeing the main family's fortune. If Therese and her siblings failed to produce a worthy heir, and Claire herself passed away, the Litter family would surely collapse, or worse, fall into the hands of a side branch. This was something Claire absolutely could not tolerate. So when Zenith and her children appeared in the capital, Claire saw not only the joy of her daughter's survival but also a glimmer of hope for the future. Especially after learning that Wood was a sword saint, she had arranged the earlier test to gauge his abilities. Wood was half Litter by blood. And besides, even if Therese married and her husband joined their family, their children would be only half Litter as well. So rather than relying on some uncertain future, Claire decided to focus on the present. Wood was right in front of her, and he was perfect? She was beyond satisfied with Wood. In just one day, her grandson had deeply impressed her, not only because of her years of guilt over Zenith but also due to Wood's exemplary character and unparalleled strength. Moving into the Litter household went smoothly. Naturally, Wood's sisters, Norn and Aisha, followed him. And just as Claire had predicted, with her children living at the Litter estate, Zenith eventually found her way back to the home she had left more than a decade ago. Initially, Zenith had feared that her mother would greet her with scolding or harsh words. But the reality was far different. The usually strict, stubborn Claire couldn't maintain her stern expression when she saw her daughter for the first time in years. Without a word, Claire rushed forward and pulled Zenith into a tight embrace. Seeing the deep wrinkles on her mother's face, the once proud Zenith broke down into tears. "Mother. I'm so sorry. For making you worry." Zenith sobbed. Family bonds are like that. No matter how the world may let you down, your loved ones will always stand by your side. Watching the tearful reunion between mother and daughter, Wood quietly took his two younger sisters by the hand and led them away, giving the two women, who hadn't seen each other in over a decade, the private moment they deserved. Chapter 294, The Whereabouts of Other Family Members. With the help of the Litter family, Wood and his group quickly gathered a lot of information about the Fitoa region. This teleportation disaster was massive, affecting nearly the entire Fitoa region. Just as Wood had predicted, the disaster occurred too suddenly, and the Azura Kingdom had no idea what caused it. As a result, to calm the people's anger, someone had to take the fall as a scapegoat to prevent a rebellion. And the unlucky one chosen to be that scapegoat was none other than the former Lord, Saoros Boreas, Aur's grandfather. When Philip learned this news, he collapsed to the ground, unable to bear the blow. His father, Saoros, was dead. The Fitola region was essentially gone, and the Azura royal family had stripped the Boreas family of their noble status as a direct consequence of the disaster. In other words, Philip and Hilda were no longer nobles of the Azura kingdom. Worse yet, if they returned to the Fitola region, they might even be executed due to their connection with Saw or Oz. As for Wood's father, Paul, with Klee's help, they were able to track down his whereabouts. When the teleportation disaster occurred, Paul was transported to the southern part of the Azura kingdom. With the help of a friend, he formed the Fitola region search party, whose goal was to find the missing family members. Upon learning Paul's location, Zenith immediately sent a letter to the Azura kingdom, requesting that he come to the Holy Millie's kingdom to reunite with them. Soon after locating Paul, Klee also used her Countess status to search through the lists of displaced persons in the surrounding countries. This led them to find Lilia in the kingdom of Sharon. At this point, the only member of the Grey Rat family whose whereabouts remained unknown was the eldest son, Rudius. The rest were either on their way to reunite or had already been located. Even though the Litra family had mobilized significant resources and manpower, they still couldn't find Rudius' whereabouts. Just as Wood and the others were growing more and more worried, fearing that Rudius might have been transported to a dangerous place like they were, unexpected news about Rudius' whereabouts came to light. This time, the information didn't come through the Litra family's network but from an adventurer in the guild. This adventurer had recently completed a mission in the Great Forest near the border of the Millie's continent. It was there that he encountered Rudius, and a demon with a long spear. When Wood had posted the request at the Adventurers Guild, he had provided portraits of Rudius and the others. The adventurer, after returning to the Holy Millie's kingdom, saw the A-rank requests and realized he had encountered them in the Great Forest. At that time, the Great Forest's beastfolk were in conflict with outsiders, and Rudius and Eris were supporting the beastfolk. Even though they were young, the two displayed remarkable strength, leaving a deep impression on the adventurer. The so-called Great Forest is the vast expanse of woodland between the Demon Continent and the Millie's continent. Besides the beastfolk, the long-eared tribe and dwarves also inhabit this forest. The homeland of Ghislaine, whom Wood knew, is located here. After learning the whereabouts of their family members, Wood and Zenith decided to split up to reunite with them as quickly as possible. Lilia, who was imprisoned in the royal palace of the Kingdom of Sharon, wasn't in immediate danger, so Wood decided that once Paul arrived in the Holy Millie's kingdom, they would go to Sharon and bring Lilia back. As for Rudius and Eris in the Great Forest, the beastfolk are fierce warriors and highly distrustful of outsiders, so the danger level was higher. Wood chose to go there himself to help them. From the adventurer's description, Wood also suspected that the demon traveling with Rudius was likely from the infamous Superd tribe. Wood had read enough books to know that the Superd tribe was universally despised. Known as the green-haired demons. Their fearsome reputation was enough to silence even the most unruly children. The capital of the Holy Millie's kingdom wasn't far from the Great Forest. Though it would take several days by carriage, it would be no trouble for the Demon Wolf King. So, the next day, after preparing his supplies, Wood set off at high speed on the Demon Wolf King, heading for the Great Forest. Meanwhile, Rudius and his companions were staying with the Beastfolk tribe as guests. They had helped the Beastfolk repel invading slave traders and protect the sacred beast, earning them a warm welcome. Having set their sights on reaching the central continent, Rudius and his group were also looking for clues about the whereabouts of their other family members as they traveled from the Demon Continent to the Great Forest. However, the areas they traveled through, both the Demon Continent and the Great Forest, were home to various races, with very few humans. As a result, they gathered little information. Stranded in an unfamiliar land and feeling lost, Rudius one day fell into a deep sleep and found himself in a strange dream, where he encountered a mysterious figure dressed entirely in white, with no visible features. The figure claimed to be the human god. Omniscient and omnipotent. At first, Rudius was wary and skeptical of this human god. Not only was the figure's origin unknown, but the fact that they could appear directly in his consciousness made Rudius, whose mental acuity far surpassed that of an ordinary boy, deeply uneasy. The human god claimed to be all-knowing and all-powerful, but it seemed they could only appear in Rudius' dreams. Despite his reservations, the information provided by the human god was uncannily accurate. In an effort to gain Rudius' trust, the human god gave Rudius his first piece of advice, which led him to encounter Kishirika. Following the human god's guidance, Rudius received the blessing of Kishirika, who gifted him the demon eye. Specifically, the Eye of Foresight. Thanks to this initial piece of advice, Rudius began to trust the human god more, and whenever he found himself in dire situations, the human god would appear to offer advice. Of course, Wood also sought the human god's guidance regarding the whereabouts of his family. However, after allowing Rudius to benefit from free advice once, the human god made it clear that he would not continue to offer his help for free. To get more answers from the human god, Rudius would have to agree to certain conditions or follow the human god's instructions in future actions. Chapter 295, The Origins of the Human God, and the Mystery of Rudius and Wood's Birth. When Rudius looked at the pixelated face of the human god, his instincts told him not to trust this being. Due to a misunderstanding, Rudius found himself captured by the beast folk for committing the supposed crime of molesting the sacred beast. Although the misunderstanding was eventually cleared up, Rudius still had to endure some hardships because of it. This incident made Rudius start to believe that although the human god didn't seem like a good person, some of what he said might be true. At the very least, the all-knowing claim appeared legitimate, and it was possible the human god had some sort of special ability, perhaps something like foresight. After a few more encounters, Rudius began to believe in the human god's omniscient abilities. When he felt utterly lost, Rudius finally reached out to the human god for help, asking how he could find his family. Seeing Rudius take the bait, the human god was inwardly delighted. To avoid arousing suspicion from the ever-cautious Rudius, the human god planned to offer him the most effective solution on his first plea for assistance, hoping to secure Rudius' complete trust. However, when Rudius mentioned his younger brother, Wood Greyrat, and asked for his whereabouts, the once confident human god froze completely. No, it was more like he was utterly dumbfounded. That's because the human god had no idea who this Wood Greyrat was. In all the futures he knew, there was no trace of such a person. The so-called human god was certainly not a benevolent entity. This being, known as Hitagami, was a mysterious figure with an unclear origin. After the death of the creator god in the void, Hitagami found and claimed the void for himself. He absorbed the remaining power of the creator god's corpse, replacing the weakest of the gods, the human god, or rather, he consumed the original human god and gained divine power in the process. Hitagami's goal was to become the one and only god in the world, but for that to happen, the other powerful gods stood in his way. The greatest of these obstacles was the dragon god, the strongest of the gods, who was Hitagami's primary rival. In order to achieve his goal, Hitagami plotted to kill the dragon god's wife, framing the four realms of the beasts, seas, sky, and demons for the crime, hoping the dragon god would destroy those realms in retaliation. Following this, Hitagami sowed discord between the dragon god and the 5 dragon generals, eventually causing 4 of the dragon generals to fight the dragon god. In the final battle, Hitagami ambushed the first dragon god, leading to the destruction of the dragon realm. In his dying moments, the first dragon god sealed Hitagami in the void, only accessible with a secret treasure of the dragon race. Because of this deep-seated hatred, each successive dragon god became the eternal enemy of Hitagami. Hitagami's power was rooted in the laws of the world, granting him an exceptionally strong ability to foresee the future, allowing him to see the fates of up to 3 people at once. While he could not foresee the futures of the dragon god or those who possessed certain secret treasures, he could see the futures of others, which allowed him to masquerade as an omniscient and omnipotent being. As for why Hitagami targeted Rudius, there was a specific reason for that too. Hitagami's future vision allowed him to see countless timelines, and in all of them, he eventually triumphed over the dragon god. That is, until Rudius, an anomaly, appeared, which caused the future Hitagami knew to shift dramatically. In the future that Hitagami had previously foreseen, Zenith and Paul were never supposed to have a son named Rudius Greyrat. Rudius was a child who was meant to die young. However, since Rudius was a reincarnator, he survived when he was supposed to perish, and what's more, he unknowingly inherited part of the power of the demon dragon king, Laplace, further preventing Hitagami from controlling his fate. Laplace was another key figure in this saga. He was the adopted son of the first dragon god, one of the original 5 dragon generals. But after Hitagami's schemes, the dragon god destroyed the 4 realms, and the dragon generals turned against their master. The battle between the dragon generals and the first dragon god resulted in the dragon realm's destruction. Laplace, who was the only one to uncover the truth, survived. However, during the second war against Hitagami, Laplace fell, and his soul split into 2 parts. One part became the present-day technique god, the strongest among the 7 great powers, Laplace. The other part of his soul ended up in the countryside where Zenith and Paul were hiding. As a result, the unborn children of that village, including Rudius, Wood, and Sylphie, inherited the Laplace factor. The Laplace factor granted them unparalleled talent in magic and immense magical reserves, even allowing them to perform chantless magic. However, due to the influence of the Laplace factor, Wood and the others were unable to generate battle aura. In short, Hitagami was the villain in this grand scheme. His ambition to become the sole god drove him to deceive the dragon god into destroying the 4 realms and later cause the dragon god's followers to turn against him, resulting in the destruction of the dragon realm. As for how Hitagami managed to deceive the first dragon god, it was quite simple. Hitagami was the dragon god's father-in-law. The woman Hitagami manipulated the first dragon god into killing was actually his own daughter. Now, with the realms of beasts, seas, sky, demons, and dragons destroyed and the first dragon god dead, the only thing left for Hitagami to do was to break the seal, at which point he would become the world's one true god. In all the futures Hitagami had foreseen, the current dragon god wasn't a match for him. That was, until Rudius, who was never supposed to exist, appeared. Hitagami believed Rudius was the key. If he couldn't eliminate Rudius, then his only option was to slowly manipulate him into standing against the dragon god, just as he had once tricked Laplace and the other dragon generals into opposing the first dragon god. However, when Hitagami tried to use his future sight to gain Rudius' trust, Rudius' first question threw him completely off balance. In the futures that Hitagami had foreseen, Rudius was not supposed to survive. Yet in this timeline, Rudius had lived. That wasn't too much of a problem, though. Despite Rudius being an anomaly, Hitagami had a good idea of why Rudius was imbued with such strong destiny. Even though Rudius was special, Hitagami could still see his future, which allowed him to offer Rudius useful advice in the past. But when it came to Wood Grey Rat, there was no sign of him in Rudius' future. There were only two possible explanations for this. First, Wood Grey Rat might have already died, which would explain his absence from Rudius' future. The second possibility was that no such person as Wood Grey Rat existed in the world at all. However, based on what Hitagami had gleaned from Rudius' memories and the information from Miris and others, it was clear that this Wood Grey Rat was real. And what's more, from what Hitagami could see in Rudius' memories, Wood, Rudius' younger brother, was somehow even more extraordinary than Rudius himself. Chapter 296, Is Wood Grey Rat already dead? The human god had seen countless future timelines, and in all of them, Zenith and Paul never had a son. Only daughters. But now, not only had this couple given birth to a son, they had given birth to a pair of twin boys. Shocked by this revelation, the human god remained silent for a long time. Thankfully, his face appeared as a mosaic to Rudius, or else if Rudius had seen his current expression, his divine image as a god would have taken a significant hit. Though it's unfortunate, I must tell you. Your so-called brother, Wood Grey Rat, is probably dead. The human god, who had been frozen in shock for too long, now donned an air of mysterious wisdom as he spoke, trying to recover the credibility he had lost. Wood is dead? That's impossible. In the consciousness space, Rudius' past self, the otaku from his previous life, collapsed onto the ground upon hearing this from the human god. For Rudius, the concept of having a younger brother brought back some innate feelings of repulsion. In his previous life, Rudius had a younger brother who often bullied him, though he had lost most of those memories. However, just like his childhood fear of the outside world, some of those negative emotions had remained in his current body, yet despite his dislike for the concept of a younger brother, Wood had become a significant figure in his childhood, allowing Rudius to experience what it meant to have a sibling. The disaster caused by the teleportation incident had been enormous, just as they had been teleported to the dangerous demon continent. Rudius had been deeply concerned that the rest of his family might have been sent to dangerous places as well. So, when he asked the human god about his family's whereabouts, his instinct had been to ask about Wood first. The reason was simple: Rudius was afraid. Afraid of hearing terrible news about his family from the human god's mouth. Wood, despite being close in age to Rudius, had always been smarter, more capable, and in every way more outstanding. Whether in strength or knowledge, Wood was ahead. Even more so than Rudius, the reincarnator. At times, Rudius had thought that his brother Wood must have been the real protagonist of this world. It was this belief that made Rudius so confident that Wood was fine. He had hoped that by getting information from the human god, he could first reunite with his protagonist brother, and together they would form a hero party to travel the world, searching for their missing family members. That would have been the perfect RPG storyline. But now, the human god was telling him that his younger brother, Wood Grey Rat, was dead? This is the truth. I am the all-knowing, all-powerful human god. I cannot be wrong. Remember the consequences you faced when you ignored my advice in the past and made poor decisions. The mosaic-faced human god seemed confident in his abilities. Apart from the dragon god and certain individuals who possessed secret treasures, his power could see the future of anyone. Clearly, while Wood might be a bit unusual, he wasn't the dragon god, nor did he possess any secret treasures. If the human god couldn't see his future, it only meant one thing: Wood was dead. The human god had expected Rudius to ask about the whereabouts of his other family members, and he had already prepared excuses for them. But to his surprise, upon hearing the death of Wood, Rudius was so devastated that he abruptly exited the consciousness space. In the aftermath of the teleportation disaster, Wood had been the family member Rudius felt most assured about. But if Wood had perished, what would become of the others? Bathed in the moonlight of the forest, Rudius' mood plummeted, to the point where he even ignored Dara's request for a sparring match. Rudius, upon seeing Rudius' indifference toward her, initially wanted to lash out in anger. But she was stopped by Ruijerd, who gently placed a hand on her shoulder. As a mature man, Ruijerd could sense that something was deeply troubling Rudius. Though he didn't know what it was, he knew Rudius needed some time to himself. I used to be so jealous of you. We had the same face, yet everyone liked you more. You could openly take baths with Lilia, while I couldn't even peek without getting scolded. Bathing with a beautiful older woman must have been amazing, but you always acted so innocent afterward. No matter what, you were always so much better than me. Whether in strength or knowledge. I always knew that your magical talent was far greater than what you let on. But how did someone as smart and capable as you die, Wood Greyrat? Weren't you supposed to be the protagonist of this world? In the empty, dark forest, Rudius' desperate scream echoed, revealing the emotions he had kept buried for so long. Just then, a shadow passed overhead, blocking the moonlight that had been shining on Rudius. Looking up, Rudius saw an enormous wolf-like magical beast, one of the dominant creatures of the forest. It had likely been awakened by his outburst and was now preparing to silence the intruder. Here I am, rushing all this way just to meet you, and I find you moping alone in the middle of the night. Also, Rudius, I had no idea this is how you've always felt about me. I've told you so many times. Lilia dragged me into those baths, I didn't have a choice. Rudius had been ready to defend himself from the wolf, but the familiar voice from atop the beast froze him in place. His body trembled uncontrollably as he processed what he was hearing. Wood. I knew it. You're not the kind of guy who'd go down that easily. As the figure leaped from the wolf's back, landing gracefully in the moonlight, Rudius' face lit up with excitement. There was no mistaking it. The person standing before him was none other than his brother, Wood, whom he had just heard died. You said it yourself. I'm the protagonist. There's no way I'd die that easily. So, tell me, how did you even come to the conclusion that I was dead? Don't tell me you've been harboring all that jealousy toward me this whole time, secretly wishing you could take me out. Wood's light-hearted teasing quickly dissolved the tension between the two brothers, breaking the awkwardness of their reunion. After all, Rudius had just bared his soul, but the subject of his confessions, Wood, had heard every word. For Rudius, this was beyond embarrassing. I got the information from the demon continent. But judging by what I'm seeing now, it must have been wrong. Despite how much he trusted Wood, Rudius didn't mention the human god. That secret was one of his most closely guarded. However, from this whole experience, Rudius realized something crucial. The human god wasn't as all-knowing and all-powerful as he claimed to be. Not long ago, the human god had confidently declared Wood to be dead, yet here Wood stood before him, very much alive. Considering everything that had happened, Rudius concluded that while the human god might be able to foresee some events, his accuracy was not absolute. Or worse, perhaps the human god had been deliberately lying to him all along. Chapter 297, The Encounter between Wood and Rudius. Party. In the end, all of Rudius' initial trust in the human god had crumbled back into doubt. What he didn't know, however, was that the human god, hiding within Rudius' subconscious, was just as shocked at the sight of Wood standing before him. Did the human god deceive Rudius? Not at all. To win Rudius' trust quickly, bait had to be dangled first. As confident as the human god was, he wasn't foolish enough to trap himself in his own lies. The human god had immense faith in his future sight ability, but even he hadn't anticipated such a swift and humiliating defeat. He had just confidently declared that Wood Greyrat was dead, only for the man to appear before them the very next moment. Shocked and curious, the human god used one of his precious future sight slots on Wood, determined to see what made him so mysterious. But much to his dismay, the human god was left utterly dumbfounded. Even though he could see Rudius' future, a unique existence, he could not see anything related to Wood. Was Wood the dragon god? Certainly not. And the human god detected no traces of any special treasure on him either. For the first time ever, the human god's future sight had failed, leaving him utterly at a loss. While Wood continued catching up with Rudius and sharing news of their family, a strange chill suddenly ran down Wood's spine. A spear tore through the darkness, its point gleaming as it targeted the throat of the Magic Wolf King. Relying on its primal instincts, the Magic Wolf King sensed the imminent danger. It launched itself backward just in time, dodging the spear, but the figure wielding it was relentless, transforming the spear into a streak of light as it pursued its target. Clang! Just when the Magic Wolf King found itself cornered with no way out, Wood vanished from where he stood, reappearing in front of the wolf, his sword raised to block the oncoming spear. Step aside, child. This is not your fight. Feeling the force behind the spear's thrust, Wood quickly recognized the strength of the green-haired warrior standing before him. His left hand reached for the hilt at his waist, and in an instant, a flash of light slashed through the air, slicing through strands of green hair and forcing his opponent back. A demon. And it seems you belong to the infamous Supered tribe. I don't know why you're here, but it's clear you're as dangerous as the rumors say. I'll deal with you here and now. Wood had read plenty of books during his childhood, and he was well aware of the Supered tribe's fearsome reputation. While he didn't believe everything written in books, the fact that this warrior had just tried to kill the Magic Wolf King on sight meant that Wood now saw him as a dangerous adversary. Wait. This is all just a big misunderstanding. Wood, stop. This Supered warrior is named Ruijerd, and he's our ally. Ruijerd helped Rudius and me cross the demon continent. We owe him a lot. Just as Wood and Ruijerd were about to clash again, Iris rushed onto the scene, and while she hadn't even had a chance to greet Wood properly, she and Rudius each grabbed hold of one of them, pulling them apart. On the other side, Rudius quickly began explaining. Ruijerd, remember how you were always curious about who Wood Greyrat was? Well, this is him, my twin brother. Iris even picked up dual wielding because of Wood's influence. As for that giant beast, it's not an enemy either. It's Wood's contract beast or something like that. After spending so much time with Ruijerd, Rudius had a pretty good idea of what had triggered the attack. As a Supered, Ruijerd had a gem on his forehead that allowed him to sense the presence of all living creatures within a wide radius, acting like a radar. He must have detected the Magic Wolf King near Rudius and Iris and assumed it was about to attack them, which had prompted his sudden assault. As for why Ruijerd had targeted the Magic Wolf King and not Wood himself, the reason was simple. In Ruijerd's mind, children were to be protected, and Wood, despite his strength, still fell into that category. After the misunderstanding was cleared up, Wood didn't hold any prejudice against Ruijerd for being a Supered. Instead, he calmly sheathed his swords and walked up to Ruijerd with a noble bow, showing his respect. I thank you for protecting my brother and my friends during these past months. Please excuse my earlier actions. Ruijerd, momentarily stunned, could only stare at Wood in disbelief. As a member of the cursed Supered tribe, Ruijerd was well aware of his race's terrifying reputation. They were known as the green-haired demons. Despised and feared across both the human and demon continents. Even Eris had been terrified when she first met him. Yet this young boy, meeting him for the first time, showed no fear. Instead, he approached him with gratitude. Rudius and Eris, however, weren't surprised by Wood's actions at all. This was exactly the kind of person Wood Greyrat was. Aren't you afraid of me, knowing that I'm a Supered? Ruijerd asked, puzzled by Wood's calm demeanor. Fear is born from ignorance. While the Supered tribe may be feared by many, you, Ruijerd, are my brother and my friend's benefactor. Would I really trust rumors over the word of my own brother and companions? What we see with our own eyes is truth. Sometimes, what's written in books isn't always correct. Don't you agree, Ruijerd? Looking at the young boy before him, Ruijerd couldn't help but feel that, despite his age, Wood carried the wisdom of someone far older. Rudius had once told him that in terms of both knowledge and strength, he was no match for his twin brother. At the time, Ruijerd hadn't believed it, as Rudius was already the most talented young man he had ever met. But after meeting Wood today, Ruijerd began to understand that Rudius had been telling the truth. It wasn't that Rudius lacked talent. It was just that Wood didn't seem like an ordinary boy at all. Whether it was his knowledge, his demeanor, or his strength, everything about him felt far more mature. While Rudius still had moments of childishness, Wood radiated a maturity far beyond his years. Chapter 298, The Temptation of the Human God. Now that they had learned the whereabouts of their family, Rudius and Eris couldn't wait to head back to the Holy Kingdom of Milis with Wood, bidding a swift farewell to the Beastman tribe. But due to Wood's arrival, when the human god looked into Rudius' future again, he noticed a drastic change from the future he had previously foreseen. In the original future the human god saw, Lilia and Aisha were supposed to be in the kingdom of Asia, eventually saved by Rudius. Paul and Norn were supposed to reunite with Rudius in the Holy Kingdom of Milis, where a conflict would break out before they reconciled. As for Zenith, her fate was even worse. She would be transported to the Labyrinth City and sealed in a giant magic crystal. By the time Rudius found Zenith, it would be 6 years later, during which Paul would die while fighting the Hydra that guarded the labyrinth. Zenith, after being trapped in the magic crystal for 6 years, would have become a vegetative state. Aura's parents, Philip and Hilda, were supposed to have been killed shortly after the teleportation disaster. But now, the future that the human god had seen for Rudius and Eris had shifted dramatically. Paul hadn't died, Zenith hadn't turned into a vegetative state, and the Greyrat family was reuniting in the Holy Kingdom of Milis. All of this change in the future was due to the appearance of Wood, someone a human god couldn't see through. Even now, with the future altered, the human god couldn't glimpse Wood's future at all. Due to the secret arts of the dragon tribe, the dragon god Orsted had been trapped in a time loop, continually hunting the human god. Yet, despite at least 400 repetitions of the time loop, Orsted had never succeeded in defeating him. That was, until Rudius, a person who was never supposed to exist, appeared in his timeline. This was why the human god had set his sights on Rudius. After 400 cycles of battle, the human god had grown tired of the endless loop. Although Orsted never managed to kill him, the human god had also never managed to break free of the cycle. To escape from the relentless pursuit of the dragon god, the human god intended to use Rudius, a special existence, to eliminate his greatest obstacle. By leveraging his ability to foresee the future, the human god could manipulate events to push Rudius onto a path where he would become Orsted's enemy. That was the human god's advantage. However, Wood's arrival had stripped him of even that advantage. If Rudius was the human god's tool to defeat the dragon god, then Wood was a massive destabilizing factor. With Wood's intelligence and leadership, combined with the fact that his fate couldn't be controlled, the human god felt a growing sense of unease. For this reason, the human god decided that Wood had to be eliminated quickly to restore the future to its original course, allowing him to regain control. While he could take direct action against Wood, doing so would risk attracting the dragon god. The human god wasn't ready for such a confrontation yet, so he needed another way to get rid of Wood. Furthermore, the fact that Wood had already defeated the Hydra and saved Zenith from becoming a vegetative state demonstrated that his strength was considerable. Currently, there were only a few individuals in the world, such as the 7 great powers or the demon kings of the demon continent, who might be able to stop Wood. That night, Rudius and his companions had planned to rest at the Beastman tribe before heading to the Holy Kingdom of Milis with Wood the next morning. However, that very night, Rudius was once again visited by the human god in his dreams. In the familiar white void, the mosaic-faced human god wasted no time, addressing Rudius directly. Rudius, you cannot go to the Holy Kingdom of Milis. You must instead travel to the Kingdom of Azura. Rudius, already suspicious of the human god due to the recent events with Wood, had no intention of listening to him. After all, Wood's very existence had proven that the human god was not the all-knowing being he claimed to be. Whether the human god was truly divine didn't matter to Rudius anymore. What mattered was that he had been deceived, and that made him untrustworthy. My family is in the Holy Kingdom of Milis. Why shouldn't I go and reunite with them? Though Rudius no longer trusted the human god, he still wanted to hear what the entity had to say. It's not that you can't go to Milis, but it's dangerous for you to go there right now. Of course, if you don't care about the lives of your father Paul and your mother Zenith, then feel free to disregard my warning. The human god knew that his earlier failure with Wood had damaged his credibility. This time, instead of demanding Rudius' obedience, he presented his words as a choice, confident that Rudius would take the bait on his own. Paul and Zenith are in danger? That's impossible. Wood said they were safe. Concerned for his parents' safety, Rudius immediately questioned the human god's claim. I'm sure your brother didn't mention that Lilia is still trapped in the royal palace of the Kingdom of Azura. Zenith and Paul are on their way there, and their lives are in grave danger. Would Zenith and Paul really face danger on their journey to Azura? In the future that the human god had seen, they would indeed encounter some trouble, but nothing life-threatening. So why was he saying this now? It was simple, to lead Rudius and Wood into a situation that aligned with his own plans. Wood's future couldn't be seen, and Rudius couldn't be controlled. With that being the case, the human god decided that it would be better if both brothers were eliminated. Otherwise, if they were allowed to grow stronger, they would become a significant threat to the human god's plans. How do I know you're not just lying again? You claim to be all-knowing, even going so far as to say you brought me into this world. But Wood's situation proves that you're not as powerful as you claim. Maybe you can predict some things, but you're clearly not infallible. Rudius' skepticism was met with silence from the human god. He knew that his previous failure with Wood had been a major blunder, and it was only natural that Rudius would no longer believe him so easily. Well, I've given you the information. Whether you choose to trust me is up to you. I really don't see why you're so worried. Are you afraid I'll manipulate you? With the strength of your group, there are hardly any beings in this world that pose a real threat to you. Chapter 299, Wood and his group's change of route. The human god not only excels at scheming but is also adept at gauging human nature. After leaving such information behind, he didn't persist in persuading Rudius as before but simply vanished from the consciousness space. He was well aware that with the current level of trust he held with Rudius, saying too much might only breed suspicion. Now that the bait was cast, all Rudius had to do was make the expected choices. After Wood joined forces with Rudius and their squad, Their group's combined strength was staggeringly potent. Wood himself possessed the might of a Sword King combined with that of an Emperor-level magician. Ruijerd was on par with a Sword King, Rudius was a King-level magician, and also an Ochant magician whose magical power far surpassed others of his rank. The Magic Wolf King boasted strength comparable to a Sword Saint, with formidable regenerative capabilities and the ability to cast high-level magic. Even the weakest member, S, had swordsmanship that reached the level of an upper swordsman. With such formidable team power, they could stand toe-to-toe with some of the lesser among the 7 great powers without fear of any danger or scheme. On the other side were Rudius' parents, possibly in life-threatening peril. The choice Rudius would make was almost predictable to the human god. The next morning, after regrouping, Wood and the others originally planned to continue on to the holy city of Milis according to their initial plan. However, just as they set out, Rudius stopped Wood and asked, "Did Paul and Zenith go to the Sharon Kingdom to fetch Lilia?" Wood was momentarily taken aback by Rudius' question, as he had only mentioned the previous day that Lilia was in the Sharon Kingdom and did not specify who would retrieve her. Wood was surprised for a moment but didn't delve into why Rudius knew this detail. He understood that as a reincarnator, Rudius having some inexplicable abilities was entirely within the realm of possibility. Wood, although it might sound unbelievable, I think Zenith and Paul might be in danger. So I've decided not to return to the Milis holy country but instead head directly to the Sharon Kingdom. Rudius was aware that his sudden request might seem unreasonable, especially since they were so close to reuniting with his family. Yet, the words of the human god had significantly bothered him. Better safe than sorry, they thought. At worst, they would only be losing a bit more time. But if Zenith and Paul were indeed in danger, they could lose their loved ones. Now, Rudius worried about how to get his brother and companions to agree to this unfounded change of plans. However, just as Rudius was organizing his thoughts and about to reveal the existence of the human god, Wood suddenly smiled and spoke up. "If that's the case, then let's head to the Sharon Kingdom. Norn and Aisha are safe with the Litter family, and with our grandmother and aunts looking after them, they should be fine." Wood did not hesitate or doubt Rudius' proposal, he simply chose to believe in him, which deeply moved Rudius, who was secretly relieved. Wood's reasoning was simple. Just as Rudius always considered him the protagonist of another world, he also believed that as a reincarnator, Rudius was a child of destiny. If the protagonist felt impending danger, there must be a reason behind it. Wood firmly chose to trust in Rudius. Or, more precisely, in Rudius' unique advantages. Oris chimed in. "If Wood says so, then there's no problem. Now that we know our parents are safe, it's only right for us to help rescue Wood's parents." Ruijerd added. "I've always said I would ensure you all get home safely. Wherever you go, I will follow until we're all safely back." Seeing his brother and comrades' responses, Rudius felt the weight of their trust for the first time. Meanwhile, the lurking human god, hearing their decision, couldn't help but reveal a triumphant smile. Indeed, Wood and his companions now formed a super-adventure group, as formidable as any legendary hero's party. With such a lineup, they could defeat 99.9% of all foes on the continent, but the being they were about to face was the invincible 0.01%. The dragon god, Orsted. In the original future, the human god had seen where Rudius would encounter the dragon god. Although Wood's appearance had altered the future, ensuring Rudius would no longer meet Orsted, the dragon god was likely still active in that area during this time. Now, the human god's goal was to steer Rudius and Wood towards the dragon god's domain, aiming for a deadly confrontation that would end the two brothers. Worried about arriving too late to rescue Zenith and Paul, Wood and the group were making rapid progress. The Magic Wolf King carried the physically weak Oris and the frail Rudius, while Wood and Ruijerd, both with strength comparable to a Sword King, moved with speed matching that of magical beasts. They raced across the landscape so swiftly that in less than 2 days, they had circled the entire Milis holy country and reached the King Dragon Mountains. The King Dragon Mountains, located at the border between the central continent and the Milis continent, were characterized by tall, rugged peaks. Due to their high altitude, they were frequently swept by massive snowstorms, making them largely uninhabited. Of course, the terrain and climate were just one reason for the scarcity of visitors. Another was the presence of flying dragons, which were technically part of the dragon race, albeit the lowest rank. Even these lowest-tier dragons possessed natural strength and magic far surpassing ordinary magical beasts and were much more intelligent. Thus, even a typical flying dragon was a formidable opponent for any upper-class swordsman or magician who dared to face one alone. After crossing the King Dragon Mountains, passing through the kingdoms of Sunkistia and Grundika would lead them directly to the Sharon Kingdom. Chapter 300, Encounter with the Dragon God. Compared to the Azura Kingdom and the holy country of Milis, the Sharon Kingdom was just a small realm on the central continent. Its territory wasn't even as large as the Fitoa region of the Azura Kingdom. Given its modest strength, finding a sword saint within the kingdom would likely prove difficult. Wood couldn't understand how veteran warriors like Paul, an advanced swordsman, and Zenith, a saint-level healer, could possibly be in any danger in such a place. However, Rudius, as a reincarnator with certain cheats, wasn't prone to making baseless claims. Wood trusted that Rudius wouldn't raise concerns without reason. As they pressed forward through the raging snowstorm, the group's pace was clearly slowed. Even though they were wrapped in thick winter coats, the biting winds felt like sharp blades cutting into their skin. In addition to battling the harsh elements, they had to contend with external dangers. Roar! A loud dragon's roar echoed through the air as a massive flying dragon swooped down from the sky, its talons aimed straight at Iris and Rudius, who were seated on the back of the magic wolf king. The dragon was smaller than the wolf in body size, but its wingspan was far larger, covering the entire length of the magic wolf king. The flying dragons that inhabited the King Dragon Mountains were known to attack any trespassers who wandered into their territory. The sudden dive of the dragon caught them off guard. As the powerful beast beat its wings, the stormy wind it generated was so strong that Iris and Rudius were blown back, unable to open their eyes to retaliate. Fortunately, they were not alone. Just as the dragon's claws reached down for its prey, Wood and Ruijerd acted in unison. Ruijerd darted in front of Iris and Rudius, using his spear to block the dragon's descending talons. At the same time, Wood leapt high into the air. With a flash of his blade, the dragon's wings were sliced open, blood spraying out before the creature crashed to the ground. The downed dragon barely had time to react to its injuries before the magic wolf king pounced on it, snapping its neck in a single bite. The dragon lay lifeless, killed within seconds. A creature as formidable as a flying dragon, which possessed power equivalent to an advanced swordsman or magician and the advantage of flight, had been felled so quickly by Wood and his companions. Had any other adventurers witnessed this scene, their jaws would have surely dropped in shock. This was a dragon. A beast so mighty that even an S-class adventuring party would struggle to defeat one without significant effort. Yet, this one was dispatched in mere moments. Even more surprising was that Wood and the others didn't even bother to collect the rare materials from the dragon's body. They simply left it behind as they continued on their way. The flying dragon wasn't the only one inhabiting the King Dragon Mountains. As they journeyed deeper into the range, more dragons began attacking them. Their numbers increased, as did their strength. Thankfully, with Ruijerd and the magic wolf king holding the front lines, Wood and Rudius were able to safely channel their magic. Together, they unleashed a combined sound-level wind and fire spell. Despite the dragon's natural resistance, the powerful magic overwhelmed them, sending the beasts plummeting from the skies like falling leaves. After the dragon swarm retreated, recognizing that these humans were far too dangerous to engage, Wood and Rudius thought the worst was over. However, the commotion caused by the saint-level magic had drawn the attention of another presence in the mountains. The human god, hiding deep within Rudius' consciousness, seemed to sense something. With a sly grin of triumph, he disappeared from the area, but not before leaving a parting gift for Wood and Rudius. His essence lingered heavily on both of them. Dragon god Orsted, the son of the first dragon god and the 100th dragon god in line, had traveled to the future using the secret reincarnation technique of the dragon tribe with one goal: to eliminate the human god. Orsted's abilities were nothing short of a cheat. Using the dragon tribe's secret techniques, he could reincarnate endlessly. If he failed to defeat the human god by the year 530 of the dragon calendar, he would retain his memories and leap back to the year 330 to begin his pursuit once again. Yet, despite more than 200 cycles of reincarnation, Orsted had never managed to defeat the human god. Each time he returned to the past, the future replayed in the same way. However, in this cycle, Orsted discovered an anomaly. A teleportation incident that had never appeared in previous timelines. Realizing that history was now diverging, Orsted believed this anomaly might be the key to defeating the human god. He began investigating the teleportation incident and eventually discovered that it was caused by a girl from another world. Determining that this girl was a crucial variable in the battle against the human god, Orsted took her under his wing and traveled across the world with her in search of clues to the god's whereabouts. As they passed near the Red Dragon's Maw in the King Dragon Mountains, Orsted suddenly sensed something. Grabbing the girl beside him, he sped off toward a certain direction. In the blink of an eye, the scenery changed before the girl's eyes. She found herself in a vastly different environment, facing a group of strangers. Two identical twin boys, a red-haired girl, and a tall green-haired man. These four were unfamiliar to her. And then there was the large wolf-like creature standing beside them, surrounded by the corpses of many dragons. After a brief moment of shock, the girl steadied herself. She reminded herself that she was now in another world, and given all the bizarre things she had seen already, this was hardly the strangest. After all, the man next to her had claimed to be a dragon god. Wood and his group had just finished clearing out the dragons. All they needed to do was cross the next ridge, and they would be out of the King Dragon Mountains. But when they saw the man and the girl suddenly standing in their path, their bodies froze. It was as if the very air around them had solidified. Even though neither the man nor the girl had attacked, simply being in their presence sent chills down the spines of both Wood and Ruijerd. There was no mistaking it. This was fear. It wasn't the cold wind that caused this sensation, it was a primal, instinctual fear, the kind that only came from standing before a being far more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. Chapter 301, Conflict with the Dragon God. Wood had always thought that the nine-headed dragon, the guardian of the mobile labyrinth, was one of the strongest beings in this world. But upon meeting Orsted, the dragon god, Wood finally understood what it meant to face true, overwhelming power. When they encountered the nine-headed dragon, it had only brought a sense of danger. However, standing before Orsted, Wood felt an intense and primal fear. The sheer aura emanating from Orsted's body was enough to induce a sense of helplessness in them, without him even needing to lift a finger. What was more terrifying was how this man and woman had appeared before them. Not just Rudius and Eris, but even Wood and Ruijerd, hadn't noticed their approach. Wood had honed his observation hockey, which allowed him to predict danger. Ruijerd's red gemstone on his forehead could sense life forms within several hundred meters. Yet neither of them had detected Orsted and his companion. This left only two possibilities: either their strength far exceeded that of Wood and Ruijerd, or they had instantly teleported within range. Dragon God Orsted. Ruijerd, being a member of the demon race and having lived for centuries, immediately recognized the significance of the figure standing before them. He knew at once who this was. He must be passing through. Ruijerd whispered. "Let's act like nothing is wrong and quietly leave. This isn't someone we can handle." If it had been any of the other members of the seven great world powers, with their current formation, Wood and the others might have stood a chance. But this was Dragon God Orsted. The chances of victory weren't just slim. They were almost non-existent. Whenever Orsted used a dragon tribe's secret reincarnation technique to reset the timeline, it consumed a vast amount of his mana, leaving him less than at full power. Yet even in his weakened state, Orsted remained one of the strongest beings in existence. To put it bluntly, aside from Technique God Laplace and the Battle God, the other members of the seven great world powers were not on the same level as Orsted. He's just passing through? It doesn't feel like it. From the moment he arrived, I've felt his gaze locked onto me and Rudius, filled with hostility. Wood remarked, his sharp instincts picking up on the dragon god's intent. Ruijerd believed that someone like Orsted would have no reason to notice nobodies like them. But Wood was sure of it. Orsted's animosity was specifically directed toward him and Rudius. It wasn't that Eris, Ruijerd, or even the Magic Wolf King had been disregarded by Orsted, they simply weren't the target of his attention. Wood, a seasoned swordsman, could sense danger keenly, and right now, Orsted's gaze made every fiber of his being tremble with fear. This was the strongest presence he had ever encountered. There was no contest. Just looking Orsted in the eye made Wood feel as though resistance was futile. At this moment, Wood was the only one in their group who could meet Orsted's gaze. Even Ruijerd, despite his strength, dared not look directly at the dragon god. It was an instinctual respect and fear for an overwhelmingly powerful being. "Rudius, did you mess with someone's wife or daughter again without me knowing?" Wood muttered, eyeing the masked girl standing next to Orsted. Though she was draped in a large cloak, her figure suggested that she was a young woman. Wood knew Rudius well. Inheriting Paul's talents and even surpassing them, Wood's first thought was that Rudius had somehow caused trouble again, and now the girl's guardian had come seeking vengeance. And because Wood happened to share Rudius' face, he was dragged into the situation as well. Ever since they were young, Wood had frequently taken the fall for things Rudius had done simply because they looked alike. PFFT. Ha ha ha. Did he just mistake me for your daughter or wife? The girl beside Orsted burst into laughter upon hearing Wood's accusation. Compared to the laughing girl, Orsted's face had turned completely black with anger. The mighty dragon god, mistaken for an avenging parent, was an insult he hadn't anticipated. "I didn't do anything. Don't just accuse me like that," Rudius protested. "Sure, she looks like she could be a beautiful girl, but I've been stuck on the demon continent this whole time. Where would I find the time or opportunity to get involved with someone?" He quickly added. "That's the dragon god, Orsted. We just killed a bunch of flying dragons. If he's angry about that, I wouldn't be surprised." While flying dragons were considered the lowest form of dragonkind, Orsted clearly wouldn't care about such trivial matters. The reason Orsted had taken an interest in them was simple: both Wood and Rudius were covered in a thick aura of the human god. The intense presence of the human god on them made it obvious, even if Wood and Rudius weren't direct followers, they were definitely linked to him. Better to strike first than let them go. Orsted didn't care about verifying their identities. The fact that they reeked of the human god's influence was reason enough for him to act. With just a gesture of his hand, an invisible shockwave, a force akin to an air cannon, was sent hurtling toward Wood and Rudius. The attack was invisible, and it moved so fast that even Ruijerd and Rudius, one of its targets, didn't have time to react. But Wood, thanks to his enhanced observation hockey, sensed the danger immediately. His body moved instinctively. Without warning, Wood kicked Rudius, sending him flying several meters away. Rudius, dazed and confused, was about to yell at Wood when he felt an immense pressure rush past where he had just been standing. Wood, who had taken the brunt of the attack, was sent flying through the air, his body skidding across the icy ground for dozens of meters before smashing through several thick ice rocks. Chapter 302, This is not an enemy we can defeat. Aside from them, there were only two others present, Dragon God Orsted and the girl standing beside him. Although none of them had seen Orsted's actions clearly, it was undeniable that he had just attacked Wood and Rudius. Once they realized what had happened, Ruijerd, and the Magic Wolf King charged at Orsted in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, Rudius, clearly distressed, rushed toward Wood, who had been flung far away by the attack. He hadn't understood why Wood had suddenly kicked him away, but after seeing how far Wood had flown from the impact, it became clear. The power of that shockwave was immense. Had Wood not pushed him aside, Rudius might be in a life-threatening condition right now. Although Rudius had trained in swordsmanship for some time, making him physically stronger than the average mage, it wasn't by much. Wood, on the other hand, was a bona fide sword king. His body having undergone rigorous training. His muscle density was comparable to that of a magical beast. Even with all that, Wood had been sent flying tens of meters away after taking the full force of the shockwave. Rudius could only imagine how far he would have been thrown if he had taken the hit himself. On the other side, in their fury, Eris and the others no longer cared that they were facing the dragon god himself. Without hesitation, they formed a triangle formation and attacked Orsted. In the next second, their expressions changed to one of utter disbelief as they stared at Orsted. Eris, an advanced swordswoman, and Ruijerd, whose strength was on par with that of a sword king, found their blades and spear tips easily caught between Orsted's fingers. As for the Magic Wolf King, the worst fate awaited him. Being the first to lunge at Orsted, he was sent flying with a single kick. Despite Orsted appearing no bigger than an average person, the massive Magic Wolf King, weighing several tons, was launched like a piece of trash with that one strike. A sickening crack echoed through the air. With a slight twist of his fingers, Orsted snapped Eris's steel sword as if it were made of brittle plastic. Before Eris, who was stunned, could recover and retaliate with her other dagger, the sheer force of the wind pressure sent her flying. Her body smashed into a nearby wall, embedding itself in the stone. Orsted had held back against Eris. If the shockwave he had used was on the same level as the one that hit Wood, Eris wouldn't have survived with such minor injuries. Unlike Eris, who was only an advanced swordswoman, Ruijerd wasn't someone who could be defeated so easily. Although Orsted had caught his spear, Ruijerd used it as a pivot to twist his body, increasing the force applied to the spear, eventually breaking free from Orsted's grip. However, just as Ruijerd regained control of his spear and aimed a counterattack at Orsted's head, Orsted once again caught the spearhead before it reached him. Orisporias, Ruijerd Sapridia. I'm not after either of you. But if you continue to interfere, I won't hesitate to kill you as well. Orsted stated coldly. Eris and Ruijerd had never met Dragon God Orsted before, yet Orsted knew both of their names. This was because, in countless of Orsted's past lives, both Eris and Ruijerd had grown into powerful figures who played key roles in the fight against the human god. This was also one of the reasons why Orsted had shown mercy to Eris. Though she was merely an advanced swordswoman at the moment, Orsted knew she had the potential to become a top-tier sword saint in the future. Possibly even strong enough to defeat a sword king. Saint-class fire magic, flashing flames. A massive crimson magic circle formed in front of Rudius's staff, the proud water dragon king. Torrents of violent flames shot toward Orsted like a flash of light. Orsted tossed Ruijerd and his cursed spear aside with ease. As for Rudius's fire magic, Orsted simply waved his hand. The powerful flames were scattered in midair as if they were nothing more than fireworks, each one intercepted by his lightning-fast punches. More and more fireballs erupted from Rudius's staff like grenades. Orsted, initially handling them with one hand, eventually had to use both to keep up. Meanwhile, from a distant pile of rubble, Wood burst out, his gaze locked on Orsted, who was busy fending off the flaming onslaught. Without a second thought, Wood drew his twin blades and dashed toward him. 6 powers. Instant transmission. Wood's foot slammed into the ground, creating a deep crater in the icy terrain. As his body shot forward, the sound of air being shattered echoed with each step. Orsted's usually emotionless eyes showed a flicker of surprise as he observed Wood's rapid approach. He had encountered strong swordsmen before, but a sword king of Wood's age was something that even surprised Orsted. Moreover, the speed at which Wood was moving was beyond that of an ordinary sword king. Orsted, with his keen eye, could tell that Wood was using an advanced movement technique, one that required an extraordinary level of physical conditioning. In a mere blink of an eye, Wood closed the distance between them, covering nearly 100 meters in an instant. Though Wood's back was turned to Rudius, the fireballs from Rudius's attack deftly avoided hitting him as if they were guided. This was partly due to Rudius's exceptional control over his magic, but it was also thanks to Wood's masterful use of observation haki. Hyaki Yagio sword style. Two-sword technique, hand-washing demon. The hand-washing demon, known for its raw power, was a yokai. In this case, the technique channeled the full strength of Wood's body into a devastating slash. It was a simple yet brutal attack, focused entirely on pure power. The sword energy was contained within the blade, while all of Wood's strength was directed into a single blow. Sensing the danger of the incoming attack, Orsted stopped deflecting Rudius's magic and crossed his arms in front of his chest to block Wood's strike. Clang! Wood's blade struck Orsted's arms, the sound of steel clashing with stone resonating in the air. A powerful shockwave erupted from the point of impact, followed by a force that sent both combatants flying apart. Wood had charged in with a 100-meter sprint, and his attack had focused entirely on raw strength. Yet when his blade struck Orsted's arms, it felt as though he had hit an impenetrable diamond rather than flesh. The force of the recoil traveled up through Wood's swords and into his arms, numbing his hands. Had it not been for the fact that his blades were no ordinary weapons, Wood feared they might have shattered from the sheer impact. Wood swords were crafted from materials taken from a 9-headed dragon, forged to be incredibly hard and sharp, with excellent magic conducting properties. In theory, he could use his swords as a staff to cast powerful magic if necessary. But right now, the absurdity of the situation was clear. It felt as though his blades, meant to cut through anything, were in danger of snapping against Orsted's flesh. Dragon God Orsted was truly on a level beyond comprehension. After the clash, both fighters were pushed back by the force. However, while Wood slid nearly 10 meters across the ground before coming to a stop, Orsted had only taken a single step back. Casually, Orsted tore off his sleeves, revealing unscathed skin beneath. Completely unharmed by Wood's mighty strike. No way. That attack could have taken down even Ghislaine, but it didn't even scratch him. And he blocked it with his arms. Is this guy even human? Witnessing the scene, couldn't believe her eyes. Wood's final strike had left the ground around them shattered like a spiderweb, yet Orsted's body remained unscathed. He hadn't even bled. Your strength is impressive, Orsted remarked. For someone so young to have such power. Given enough time, you might have reached my level one day. But since you are connected to the human god, allowing you to grow stronger would only spell trouble. It is better to eliminate you before you can become a true threat. Horace and the others were shocked by Orsted's ability to withstand Wood's attacks without injury, but Orsted himself was equally astonished by the potential of the young swordsman standing before him. Orsted could tell Wood was only 12 years old, yet he was already on par with a sword king, possessing enough strength to push Orsted back. Rudius, though not as physically gifted as Wood, also had an extraordinary amount of mana for his age. The fact that he could cast saint-level magic without chanting was a testament to his overwhelming talent. Of course, in Orsted's mind, the source of their power likely came from the human god. Just as Orsted had been pursuing the human god for ages, the human god, in turn, sought ways to defeat Orsted. These two boys, marked by the thick aura of the human god, seemed to be part of that plan. Ruigerd, Magic Wolf King. Leave now. His targets are Rudius and me. There's no need for you to stay and die with us. Wood didn't know what Orsted was thinking, nor did he understand who the human god was. But one thing was clear to him. Based on that last exchange, Dragon God Orsted was an enemy they couldn't hope to defeat, no matter how hard they tried. Rather than have everyone die here, it was better to save as many as possible. What the hell are you saying? There's no way I'm running and leaving you behind. I refuse to believe that, together, we can't beat him. Unable to accept Wood's plea, picked up her fallen dagger and charged back toward Orsted. Ruigerd didn't say anything, but his actions spoke volumes. He tightened his grip on his spear and sprinted toward Orsted's back. Facing their combined assault, Orsted didn't even spare them a glance. In an instant, he vanished from their sight. Orsted's dagger and Ruigerd's spear struck only empty air. Orsted was no longer where he had been standing. Wood. Watch out. He's aiming for your heart. Though neither Eris nor Ruigerd could keep up with Orsted's speed, Rudius had seen it. Thanks to the human god's guidance, he had received the power of the magic eye from the demon Emperor Kishirika. a power that allowed him to see a few seconds into the future, and just now, Rudius had glimpsed Orsted reappearing in front of Wood and thrusting his hand through Wood's chest. Normally, using the magic eye drained Rudius's mental energy, but with Orsted as the target, the strain was immense. As soon as he issued his warning, Rudius felt as though his eye was about to explode. The pain was so intense that blood flowed from his eye, and he collapsed to the ground, clutching his face. On the other side, Wood had already sensed danger through his observation hockey. However, Orsted's speed made it impossible to tell where the attack would come from until he heard Rudius's warning. Orsted was aiming for his heart, which meant he'd be coming from the front. But even if Wood reacted and tried to dodge, could he really evade the Dragon God's attack? Even if he managed to avoid this strike, what about the next? Rudius's ability clearly put an immense strain on him. How many more times could he use it against Orsted? Chapter 303, Pushing Beyond Limits. Wood reaches the divine level. In that brief moment, Wood's thoughts raced, and he made a shocking decision. To confront Dragon God Orsted head-on. From their earlier exchanges, it was clear that there was a vast gulf in power between them and Dragon God Orsted. Even if they managed to dodge the first attack, they wouldn't be able to handle the second or third. Since there was no way to dodge or block the attacks, Wood decided to abandon defense entirely and go for an all-out, do-or-die attack. Even if he died in the process, it might create an opening in Orsted's net, giving Rudius and the others a chance to escape. Wood believed he could at least achieve that much. After all, this was just a simulated life for him. Even if he died here, it wasn't real death, but Rudius and Eris only had this one life. As the rune on Wood's chest, marking the heart of God, began to glow, an overwhelming surge of magical power erupted from him and rapidly channeled into his twin blades. Wood swords, forged from materials of the nine-headed dragon by the finest craftsmen in the Holy Millie's kingdom, were not just weapons but also highly conductive magical tools, able to be used as wands. With an immense flow of magic now flooding into the blades, the swords began to tremble, emitting a sound akin to a dragon's roar. The surrounding temperature soared rapidly, and the ice beneath Wood's feet began to melt. Flames of a magnitude comparable to Emperor-level magic suddenly erupted from Wood's sword, spreading like fiery wings. Hyaki Yagio's sword style. Elemental dual blades, Phoenix Fire. This was Wood's newly evolved sword technique, blending the flexibility and speed of swordsmanship with the raw power of magic, creating a new style. Wood had long contemplated how magic, despite its power, often required long incantations and slow casting times, limiting its effectiveness in fast-paced combat. Even with his mastery of chantless magic, the time it took for a magic circle to appear and a spell to release was still more than enough for him to swing his sword dozens of times. Magic was undeniably powerful, but it was slow, and the body of a mage was typically weak. In contrast, swordsmen were fast but had a limited range of attack. Wood, having mastered both high-level magic and swordsmanship, constantly sought a way to combine the speed of swordsmanship with the destructive power of magic. But for years, he had struggled to find a solution. That changed when he fought his grandmother Claire in the Luttra family mansion. From the weapon she used, a sword that also functioned as a staff, Wood found his inspiration. Through Claire's introduction, Wood sought out the craftsman who had made her weapon and explained his idea, using the materials from the nine-headed dragon to forge the twin blades known as Dragon's Fangs. Thanks to the unique properties of the materials, these swords were not only incredibly durable but also had excellent magic conductivity, able to withstand the full power of Wood's magic. By channeling his magic into the swords and using the blade as a conduit for spells, Wood retained the speed and precision of his swordsmanship while adding the devastating power of magic. Wood was no longer merely a swordsman or a mage. He had become the world's first magic swordsman. A magic swordsman. One who uses magic to fight with a blade. Orsted was too fast for Wood to avoid his attacks, but knowing the direction and target of the strike gave him a chance. By focusing all his strength, Wood could at least avoid a fatal blow. His fiery blades moved like the wings of the mythical phoenix, their scorching heat capable of incinerating all in their path. Seeing Wood's blazing attack, Orsted's expression finally showed a flicker of surprise. To be honest, Orsted had never been concerned by Emperor-level mages or Sword King-level swordsmen. After all, he was a true god-level being. But Orsted had to admit that Wood was the most impressive human he had encountered in his countless reincarnations. Without question. Throughout history, only a handful of people had ever created their own sword style. Yet, at such a young age, Wood had not only done that but had also achieved the unprecedented feat of fusing magic and swordsmanship into an entirely new power. Moreover, Wood wasn't just exceptionally talented and strong, he had remarkable courage and decisiveness. Through Rudius's warning, Orsted realized that Wood had the ability to dodge this attack. But instead, Wood chose not to. In the blink of an eye, he had decided to confront Orsted directly. A truly remarkable individual. Even after countless reincarnations, I've never met someone like you. Even as an enemy, I can't help but respect you. But that's exactly why, as a follower of the human god, you must die here. The more extraordinary Wood's talent and strength, the more determined Orsted became to kill him. In Orsted's eyes, Wood was a follower of the human god. Given his current potential, if allowed to grow further, he would become an even greater threat in the future. Orsted's hand shot forward, aiming straight for Wood's heart. At the same time, the runes on Wood's chest blazed brightly, and the intense heat from his twin blades carved a path straight toward Orsted's chest. Neither of them made any attempt to dodge. Both were intent on destroying the other with everything they had. Wood didn't fear death. He knew it was inevitable, and even if he managed to evade this strike, it wouldn't matter in the end. His goal now was to create an opportunity for Rudius and the others to escape. As for Orsted, despite the power behind Wood's attack, dodging it wouldn't have been difficult. But as the son of the first dragon god and the current dragon god, how could he retreat from an enemy who stood before him? The pride of the dragon god forbade Orsted from backing down. And for such a worthy warrior, this was his final show of respect. Boom! A thunderous explosion echoed through the Dragon King Mountains, and the entire range trembled as if struck by an earthquake. The moment their attacks connected, an invisible shockwave rippled across the land, splitting the frozen ground into massive cracks. Wave after wave of destructive force swept outward, obliterating everything in its path. Rudius, Ruijerd, and even the massive magic Wolf King were all blown back, sent tumbling dozens of meters by the overwhelming blast. The only person left standing amidst the chaos was the girl who had been with Orsted. Despite having no noticeable magical aura or remarkable physical traits, she remained untouched. Whether it was thanks to some hidden treasure or Orsted's protection, the shockwaves vanished before they could reach her. Wood's clash with Orsted had reshaped the entire Dragon King mountain range. The battle's aftermath continued for several minutes before the storm of magic and force finally began to settle. As the dust cleared, Rudius and the others rushed to the scene, craning their necks to peer into the massive crater left behind by the impact. The blizzard began to subside, revealing the figures of Wood and Orsted standing face to face. Rudius and Eris's eyes widened in horror at the sight before them, and they charged toward the crater, ignoring Ruijerd's attempts to hold them back. Wood stood opposite Orsted, the twin blades known as Dragon's Fangs still radiating heat as they pierced an inch into Orsted's chest, steam rising from the wound. But Wood's own situation was far worse. Orsted's arm had pierced clean through his chest, blood pouring onto the snow, staining it bright red. Anyone could see that in this exchange of blow for blow, Wood had come out the worse. While the wound Wood inflicted on Orsted wasn't superficial, it was far from fatal. Not even serious. Meanwhile, Wood's injuries were clearly life-threatening. Even if he somehow survived, he was already on the verge of death. This was why Rudius and Eris had lost all reason upon seeing the scene, charging recklessly at Dragon God Orsted. Orsted, feeling the pain from the wound in his chest, glanced down at Wood, still clinging to life, with a look of admiration. Thanks to the power of the Heart of God, Wood's last sword strike had been elevated from Sword King level to that of a Sword Emperor. And combined with the Emperor level fire magic infused into the strike, the attack had approached the realm of God level. A 12-year-old boy delivering a strike on par with the sword gods. Who would believe it? Orsted, his expression cold, withdrew his arm from Wood's chest, causing a fresh spray of blood to gush from the wound as Wood collapsed to the ground. Pulling out the twin blades lodged in his chest, Orsted placed them beside Wood. A final gesture of respect for the fallen warrior. Looking at the blood on his hands, Orsted couldn't help but feel a twinge of regret. He had forgotten how long it had been since anyone had managed to wound him. If this boy wasn't a follower of the human god, Orsted might have considered recruiting him. As Rudius and Eris leaped into the crater, Orsted's expression quickly returned to its usual indifference. The only one who had posed a true threat to him, Wood, was no longer a factor. As for the rest, they hardly mattered to him. You killed Wood. I'll destroy you. You bastard. We had no grudge against you. Why are you targeting me and my brother? Eris, charging with her dagger aimed at Orsted's head, was easily sidestepped. With a swift grab, Orsted flung her back toward the oncoming Ruijerd, sending them both flying 100 meters away. Meanwhile, Rudius, now consumed by rage, activated his magic A, blood still dripping from it, and summoned a Water King level spell, hurling it at Dragon God Orsted. At this level of magic, even Orsted, not in his peak form, had to acknowledge the threat. He flashed out of the way, only for Rudius's magic to seemingly anticipate his movement and intercept him. Seeing the spell home in on him, Orsted's expression flickered with surprise before he countered with his own spell of equal level, negating Rudius's attack. Thanks to Orsted's retreat, Rudius managed to reach Wood's fallen body, gripping his staff. Prideful Water Dragon King. And glaring defiantly at the Dragon God. An impressive magic A, an unusual amount of magical power, and remarkable talent with magic. You may not be as strong as that boy, but you're no ordinary child either. Still, as long as you have ties to the human god, you must be eliminated. Hopefully, the next time we meet, I will reach you before the human god does. By next time, Orsted was clearly referring to the next cycle of reincarnation. He hoped to encounter Rudius and Wood before the human god could influence them. However, Orsted hadn't considered that both Wood and Rudius were unique to this particular timeline. Even if he lost to the human god again in this world, he would never encounter Wood or Rudius in any other timeline. Chapter 304, The Youngest Sword God in History. We have nothing to do with the human god, and we're certainly not his followers. Even if someone had encountered this so-called human god, it would only have been me. What does any of this have to do with Wood? At first, Rudius had no idea why Orsted had been so hostile toward him and his brother. But after hearing Orsted's words, the reason suddenly became clear. The so-called dragon god standing before him was apparently an enemy of the human god who had previously appeared in his subconscious realm with a pixelated face. Because Rudius had come into contact with the human god and even received certain benefits from him, his aura had become tainted with the human god's influence, leading Orsted to view him as an accomplice. Rudius could understand why Orsted would target him, but why was Wood being dragged into this? Could it be that Wood had also encountered the so-called human god in his subconscious? That seemed impossible. Based on Rudius' previous interactions with the human god, it was clear that the deity was unfamiliar with Wood. Moreover, if the human god had known about Wood, he wouldn't have provided Rudius with false information about his brother's death. That lie had only increased Rudius' suspicion toward him. From the very beginning, Rudius had been trying to connect with the human god again, hoping for his assistance. But no matter how hard he tried to summon him, the human god, who had always been quick to respond, was nowhere to be found, as if he had disappeared completely. The human god and the dragon god were mortal enemies. When Rudius recalled that it was the human god who had sent them on this path, everything made sense. They had been completely manipulated by him. Although Rudius couldn't understand why the human god's attitude toward him had shifted so dramatically. He had once gone out of his way to please Rudius, clearly trying to use him to achieve some goal. Now, the deity had turned around and used Orsted to try to eliminate him. When had things started to change? It had to be after Wood appeared. Could Wood's presence have made the human god wary? Rudius may have been a shut-in, but he wasn't stupid. In his previous life, as a veteran gamer, his analytical and logical thinking skills were top-notch, and it didn't take him long to piece it all together. However, at this point, even if Rudius knew that they had been played by the human god, what could he do? It didn't change the fact that Wood was on the brink of death at Orsted's hands. Rudius' fury surged within him. Even if he had been used as a pawn by the human god, he could never forgive the dragon god, Orsted. As for Orsted, he had originally assumed that Wood and Rudius had merely been unwittingly marked by the human god, hence carrying his taint. But after hearing Rudius' words, Orsted's expression shifted for the first time. The dragon god, who had previously maintained a stoic, expressionless demeanor, now had visible veins bulging on his forehead. His expression turned fierce and furious as he glared at Rudius and demanded. "So, you've actually met the human god? Tell me, where is that bastard now?" Orsted had been searching for the human god for an unfathomably long time. If it came to a one-on-one fight, the dragon god was confident that he could defeat and even seal away the human god. But the human god was far too cunning, always choosing to hide when Orsted was in a weakened state. The human god had an uncanny ability to manipulate people's minds, easily turning powerful individuals into his puppets, having them act as his disciples and execute his will. Meanwhile, the human god himself would bide his time, gathering strength in the shadows until he was powerful enough to face the dragon god once more. Even if I knew where the human god was, do you think I'd tell you? Especially now? Rudius responded coldly. If Orsted had approached them with questions rather than attacking from the start, Rudius, who was already wary of the human god, might not have minded exchanging information with him. But now that Orsted had nearly killed his brother, Rudius considered the dragon god nothing short of an enemy, regardless of any misunderstandings between them. "You're asking for death?" Orsted roared, his deep-seated hatred and resentment toward the human god clouding his judgment. He had lost all reason at this point and launched a powerful dragon technique at Rudius. Just like Rudius' specialty, no chant magic, the dragon god's techniques required no incantations and were far more potent than regular magic. Orsted had already lost his ability to think rationally, having been through hundreds of cycles of reincarnation, which only deepened his obsession and hatred toward the human god. At this point, he no longer cared whether Rudius was truly a disciple of the human god. All that mattered was that Rudius had seen him, and that was enough. Orsted was determined to extract any information he could from Rudius, regardless of the cost. Streams of light, like laser beams, shot from Orsted's hand. This was one of the Dragon God's secret techniques, with power on par with king-level magic. These beams required no incantations, and their speed far surpassed that of regular arrows. As the beams rushed toward him, Rudius, with the help of his foresight eye, could see their trajectories, but he knew full well that his physical capabilities wouldn't allow him to dodge the attack. "I'm sorry, Wood. It looks like I won't be able to avenge you after all. I wonder if Zenith and the others will mourn us if we both die here." Rudius gripped his staff, the arrogant Water Dragon King, unleashing a Water King-level spell enhanced by the staff's power. Yet, his foresight eye had already shown him that his magic wouldn't be enough to block Orsted's Dragon God technique. Facing death once again, Rudius felt an eerie sense of calm. He couldn't even remember how he died in his past life, only that he had been useless. The gods had given him a second chance at life, but he had failed to cherish it, and now he was about to die without having accomplished anything. In the face of death, Rudius felt neither fear nor regret, only concern for the grief his family would feel when they learned that both he and Wood had died here. It didn't matter what happened to him, but Aisha and Norn, those two little girls, would probably cry their hearts out, especially since they had always idolized Wood and looked up to him like a hero. As for his regret, it was that he had trusted the human god's lies, dragging Wood into danger along with him. Just as the beams of light were about to pierce Rudius' body, and he had closed his eyes to accept death, a massive stone wall suddenly rose from the ground, intercepting Orsted's attack. Among everyone present, only 4 individuals were capable of casting magic at this level: Orsted, Rudius, the Magic Wolf King, and Wood. Orsted certainly hadn't attacked Rudius while simultaneously casting a protective spell over him. The Magic Wolf King was capable of using advanced magic, but only in the fire element, not earth. Rudius had been ready to embrace death and definitely hadn't conjured the magic himself. That left only one other possibility. It had to be Wood. Seeing the stone wall before him, Rudius turned around in surprise, only to see his brother, who he had assumed was dead, clutching his bleeding chest with one hand while inscribing a brown magic circle on the ground with the other. "Wood, you've got a hole in your chest, and you're still alive?" Rudius was both shocked and overjoyed to see his brother alive. He couldn't help but marvel at the absurd resilience of other-world protagonists. His brother had literally been pierced through the chest and yet was still standing, fighting as if nothing had happened. It was like he had some sort of cheat code. "Do I look fine to you, idiot? Stop with the nonsense. I'm going to buy you both some time. Get out of here while you can. He's too powerful. If we all die here, at least let me be the one to buy you a chance at survival." Rudius, who had been overjoyed at seeing Wood alive, immediately grew emotional at his brother's words. He quickly retorted, "If someone has to stay behind, it should be me. It's my fault for trusting the human god's lies and putting you in danger in the first place. So, I should. You think you should stay behind? Get real. Rudius Greyrat, do you think you're strong enough to buy time? Besides, in my current state, even if I survive this, I probably won't last long. Great power comes at a cost. My current strength comes at the expense of my life. Don't let me waste it. Also, if you see Zenith and Paul, tell them I'm sorry. And let Aisha and Norn know that their brother died a hero." Before Rudius could finish, Wood cut him off, coughing up a mouthful of blood as he spoke. Wood's condition was beyond dire. Although the healing magic circle engraved on his body had immediately started working on his injuries, healing magic had its limits. While it could treat wounds, it couldn't regenerate destroyed organs. Earlier, when Orsted had struck at his heart, Wood had barely managed to dodge a fatal blow, allowing him to cling to life. But many of his other internal organs had been crushed in the attack. Combined with the toll the heart of God exacted on his life force, Wood was losing strength with every passing moment. As he said himself, even if he did survive this fight, he wouldn't last much longer, and at best, he would be left a broken shell of a person. Rudius had more to say, but before he could, Wood had already drawn his twin blades and launched himself at Orsted, shattering the ground beneath him as he charged. With his back against the wall, Wood fought recklessly, without regard for his own safety. With the Heart of God activated at maximum power, Wood's attacks reached an unprecedented level of strength. A green magic circle spread across Wood's chest, glowing in harmony with the silver runes etched into his skin. Thanks to the amplification from the Heart of God, the effects of Wood's healing magic circle had been significantly enhanced. The gaping wound in his chest had already closed up by the time he charged at Orsted, leaving him looking almost as if he hadn't been injured at all. Of course, this was merely a facade. His organs remained shattered, and although the flesh had regenerated, it was only skin deep. With a blue glow illuminating his blades, Wood swung his sword at Orsted with enough force to threaten the dragon god's life. For the first time, Orsted didn't dare catch the blade with his bare hands as he had before, and instead pulled a magic sword from his spatial storage to block the attack. Boom. The two blades collided midair, but this time, the situation was different. Wood was no longer being completely overpowered by Orsted. Orsted, wielding his sword in one hand, was taken aback. The sheer strength transmitted through the blade was far greater than he had anticipated. Orsted's magic sword, Jisai, was slowly being pushed down, while the ground beneath his feet began to crack and give way. Soon, rocks and rubble rose up around them, obscuring both Orsted and Wood from view. With a single swing, the entire Dragon King mountain range quaked, and the force of Wood's sword created a massive gorge hundreds of meters long, slicing the mountain in two. Such devastating power far surpassed the level of a sword emperor or an emperor-ranked magician. This was truly the power of a god-level being. Wood's mastery of sword emperor-level swordsmanship, combined with the attribute magic formed by an emperor-level mage, enhanced by the heart of God, had turned each of Wood's strikes into an attack worthy of a true sword god. Though he had achieved this pseudo-sword god level through an unconventional means, it didn't change the fact that Wood had stepped into the realm of the gods, becoming the youngest sword god in history. Chapter 305, Knowing Death is Certain, Might as Well Fight. The dragon god Orsted wasn't an ordinary god-level powerhouse. Even with Wood burning his life force to reach a pseudo-god level, he still couldn't defeat him. But even though Wood couldn't win, with his current strength, he could at least hold Orsted off long enough to buy time for Rudius and the others to escape. As Wood charged toward Orsted, fully prepared to fight to the death, Rudius instinctively wanted to follow. But before he could take a step, Ruijerd suddenly appeared behind him, holding the unconscious Eris in one arm and stopping Rudius with the other. Don't waste your brother's sacrifice. He made this decision knowing the consequences. He's a true warrior. Ruijerd, having crossed swords with Orsted earlier, knew that none of them stood a chance against the dragon god. If Orsted truly intended to kill them, they wouldn't even have the slightest chance to resist. Wood Greyrat had unleashed this kind of strength, clearly through the use of some forbidden technique. Originally, it should have been Ruijerd standing in front, holding Orsted at bay to protect the children. However, Ruijerd knew he wasn't strong enough to fulfill that role. Ruijerd admired Wood's resolve and knew it was his responsibility to honor Wood's sacrifice by ensuring their escape. Fine. You all can go, but that bastard Wood always plays the hero, ever since we were kids. Why does the useless one get to survive? How can I face Zenith and Norn if I return alive? Rudius screamed in frustration, his voice breaking. He was about to rush toward the battlefield when Ruijerd, without warning, delivered a swift chop to the back of Rudius' neck, knocking him out cold before slinging him over his shoulder and running off. Sorry, Rudius. I can't let you throw your life away. At our current level, even if we went back, we'd only get in his way. We wouldn't be able to help him at all. As shockwaves rocked the entire Dragon King mountain range, the tremors came one after another. The flying dragons that once made the mountains their home were now taking to the skies, roaring in panic as they sensed the life-threatening danger. The glaciers cracked rapidly, and with each clash from the battle echoing through the valley, many of the once mighty peaks were being cut down piece by piece. Ruijerd and the Demon Wolf King, one carrying Rudius and the other carrying Eris, darted and leaped over the crumbling glaciers, trying to put as much distance between themselves and the center of the battle as possible. Meanwhile, in the valley where the two figures continued to fight, Orsted, wielding his magic sword Jisai, was covered in cuts and scrapes. His chest bore two particularly deep slashes, but countless other smaller wounds crisscrossed his body. Upon closer inspection, however, it became clear that while Orsted had many injuries, none of them were life-threatening, nor even particularly severe. Despite his battered appearance, Orsted still retained a significant amount of fighting power. In contrast, Wood was in far worse shape. His condition could no longer be described as merely battered. It was downright horrific. The high-intensity battle, combined with the constant drain on his life force, had left Wood's aura in disarray. His breathing was labored, and even speaking took great effort. His body was covered in deep, bone-revealing wounds, and his left arm was completely gone, though it was unclear exactly when it had been lost. Of his two dragon fangs blades, one was now held in his right hand, while the other was clenched between his teeth. Spitting the blade from his mouth, Wood glared at Orsted, his life force fading fast, but his expression showed no fear of death. Dragon God Orsted. You're like a monster. Even after giving everything I had, I couldn't even leave a single fatal wound on you. Was Orsted strong? Wood could answer that with absolute certainty. He was overwhelmingly powerful. Though Wood had only been 12 years old in this world, and his body wasn't yet as honed as it had been in the world of One Piece, his mastery of Haki and the Six Powers was also far from the level he had attained there. But with the existence of Emperor-level magic and his own development of the magic swordsman style, which combined swordsmanship and magic, Wood was still incredibly strong. even if not quite as strong as his one-piece counterpart. Yet, even with all that power, he had been utterly crushed by Ørsted. Wood could sense that Ørsted hadn't even used his full strength. It was as if the dragon god had been holding back, possibly reserving some of his magic power, or maybe Ørsted simply wasn't at his peak condition. For a human like you to reach such a level. This is the first time I've seen such a thing. I can hardly imagine how you've managed to grow this strong. If the human god had more followers like you, I might never be able to face my true enemy in this lifetime. Ørsted despised the human god, and by extension, he loathed the god's followers. Yet, he couldn't help but offer Wood such high praise. Even if I told you that I have nothing to do with the human god, that I don't even know who he is, I doubt you'd believe me. So. No, I believe you. You probably don't have anything to do with the human god. At least, I don't think you're one of his. The voice that interrupted Wood wasn't Ørsted's. It was the voice of the black-haired girl who had been standing by his side. She removed her mask, revealing an East Asian face with black hair and black eyes. In this other world, where most people's facial features were more westernized, such an appearance was quite rare. The girl's name was Shizuka Nanahoshi. Like Rudius and Wood, she was also from another world. However, unlike Wood, who was a simulated personality created by his system, retaining only his memories while having a new soul and body, or Rudius, who had been reincarnated with only his soul from his past life, Shizuka Nanahoshi had been entirely transported to this world, body and soul. Perhaps because of this, she had never been able to learn this world's magic. In fact, the teleportation incident that had devastated Wood's homeland, the Fitoa region, was caused by Shizuka's arrival in this world. As an ordinary girl from another world, her only distinguishing feature was her knowledge of the modern world. Protected by Ørsted's secret techniques, Shizuka had remained unscathed despite the battle between Wood and the dragon god, which had left the surrounding mountains in ruins. Now, she stepped forward, attempting to stop the fight. From her earlier conversations with Ørsted, Shizuka had learned about the ancient feud between the dragon god lineage and their nemesis, the human god. Unlike Ørsted, who was often driven by his deep-seated hatred for the human god, Shizuka maintained a more objective perspective and was able to think more clearly. After considering everything, she decided to intervene and stop the fight. You think he has nothing to do with the human god? That's impossible. The stench of the human god's influence on him is even stronger than on his brother. Ørsted immediately refuted, confident in his ability to detect his nemesis aura. According to what you told me earlier, your enemy, the human god, is a careful and cunning figure, right? If you had subordinates as powerful as these two, would you send them out to die in dangerous situations? Both Wood Greyrat and Rudius Greyrat are extraordinary talents in this world. If you gave them a bit more time, they could easily become the human god's main force against you, right? So here's the question. If these two are such exceptional talents, why would the human god send them directly into your hands to be killed? The human god has clearly been able to avoid your pursuit so far, meaning he must have some means of tracking your movements. In other words, their encounter with you, dragon god Ørsted, might not be a coincidence but a carefully laid trap by the human god. That's why I believe what Wood says. While I don't know what relationship they have with the human god, one thing is clear. They aren't on his side. The human god is trying to use you to eliminate them, which fits perfectly with his manipulative and treacherous nature. Shizuka's words made Ørsted freeze in place. Hearing her analysis, the once enraged dragon god began to calm down. Her explanation made sense and was indeed characteristic of the human god's style. After all, in the past, the human god had orchestrated the death of Ørsted's daughter, framing the other four realms. Then, after Ørsted had destroyed the four realms in revenge, the human god had turned Ørsted's own 5 dragon generals against him. The combination of framing and using others as tools to kill was something the human god excelled at. As Ørsted pieced it all together, he realized, to his horror, that he had fallen into the same trap as the first dragon god. The human god had exploited Ørsted's hatred to eliminate those who posed a threat to him. In other words, Wood and Rudius weren't disciples of the human god but rather enemies he considered dangerous. They were the hope of this timeline's fight against the human god. With everything suddenly clear, Ørsted looked at Wood again, this time without any hostility. As an apology, he even intended to use his Dragon Clan secret technique to heal Wood. Dragon Clan magic was far stronger than ordinary healing spells. Even shattered organs could be restored as long as there was a shred of life left in the body. Ørsted was certain he could pull Wood back from the brink of death. Though such a spell would consume an enormous amount of magical power, Ørsted deemed it a worthy expenditure. Ordinarily, Ørsted wouldn't care if he killed someone by mistake. Most people were no more than ants in his eyes. But Wood was different. Their duel had convinced Ørsted that Wood was special. His strength and talent were unmatched in any of the hundreds of loops Ørsted had experienced. If someone as terrifyingly talented as Wood were on the human god's side, he would be a nightmare as an enemy. But if Wood was an enemy of the human god, that made him an ally. As the enemy of his enemy, Wood's strength and talent made him an invaluable asset. Sacrificing some magic power to gain a future ally in the fight against a human god was a trade well worth making. However, just as Orsted was about to call a truce and heal Wood, Wood suddenly jumped back, avoiding the dragon god's approach. I admit my earlier actions were impulsive, and I appreciate your strength. I would like to recruit you to my side. Given your current condition, ordinary healing magic won't be enough to save your life. Orsted wasn't lying. During their fight, he had grown to admire Wood's character and strength. If Wood had been a follower of the human god, Orsted wouldn't have hesitated to kill such a talented individual to prevent future problems.